On today's episode, we have our full recap of ICAST 2024. Now, you've probably seen thousands of videos and photos and hot takes from ICAST this year, but I can promise you, you haven't heard anything quite like this yet. That's because today, you're going to get a full, comprehensive, unfiltered, unbiased look at all of the new gear that was just released, along with our true, honest opinions on the hundreds of products that we were able to pick up and demo. So some were good, some were bad, some were head scratchers to say the least, but sit back, relax, and enjoy our complete wall-to-wall coverage of ICAST 2024.
Hello everybody, I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors, Mossy Oak, and Dakota Lithium.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast, a very, very special episode we have for you guys today. Maybe our most highly anticipated show of the year, certainly one of them, and we have a treat of a program for you today. But before we jump in, we do have to give a huge shout out to American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. And today, you're going to hear us talk about a lot of new gear, and one of the best places to buy that new gear from, if you're interested, is through our great friends over at American Legacy Fishing. In fact, if you go to www.americanlegacyfishing.com right now, some of the items from today's episode are already available for pre-order, and more of them will be added to the site shortly as new products hit the market in the coming months. So if you're looking for the latest and greatest in new gear, or if you're looking to save money by browsing their ever-expanding selection of gently used gear, ALF is my favorite tackle shop in the country, and I sincerely recommend you check them out. Great service, fast shipping, actual people to answer your questions, a fantastic loyalty program, great used selection, a ton more, all from a great family-owned Midwestern shop that wants nothing more than to make their customers happy and put the best fishing gear in the world in your hands. So check them out over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com, and as always, be sure to use code TACKLETALK10. That's going to save you 10% on almost everything on the website that's not already on sale or not one of the few exclusions. Everything else, 10% off with code TACKLETALK10 over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. Okay, everybody, today we have a mountain of information and opinions headed straight into your ear holes. That's because I took 3 vacation days off of work. I spent my hard-earned money to book a dirt cheap flight, last row, middle seat flight, round trip to Orlando, Florida, where I stayed in a beautiful -3-star hotel with like 2 English channels and 37 Spanish channels on its 18-inch box TV. But all of that was a very small price to pay to be able to ride down the escalator and walk into the mecca of bass fishing tackle and gear that was ICAST 2024. So for 1 week a year, the International Convention of Allied Sport Fishing Trade, or ICAST, takes over the Orange County Convention Center's 2.1 million square feet of exhibition space, and Orlando becomes the hub of new freshwater and new saltwater gear for the coming year. So that means soft baits, hard baits, rods, reels, line, clothing, batteries, kayaks, coolers, terminal tackle, electronics, you name it, it's in that convention center somewhere. And here at Tackle Talk, we get a really unique opportunity to fully immerse ourselves in all of the gear at that show versus the majority of people that are in that room that are there to work for a certain brand or promote certain brands. But we, on the other hand, are not only media, but we're media without any rod, reel, line, or bait affiliations by design, which makes ICAST way more fun for us than for most people because we don't have to toe any company lines. We don't have to stand there at gunpoint and make some 30-second video telling you why you need this new straight tail minnow and why it's going to be a game changer. We get to be honest, and that's what we're going to do here today. I'm going to highlight a lot of what we saw over the past few days, and a lot of it was good. Some of it was not so good, but I'm going to tell you why I feel the way I do about each of these products and try to be as objective and fair as possible to give you guys a heads up about the new baits and the new products that are going to be flooding your timelines and your email inboxes and your local stores here within the next few months. So you guys know the drill by now. This is our third year in a row heading to ICAST and putting this show together. And as usual, you can expect not only to hear from me, but within this episode, we're going to have interview segments that we recorded with some familiar faces in the fishing industry, representing a wide variety of brands. But the one thing that I tried to do a little differently this year was I wanted to talk to the person that I thought would be most knowledgeable about the particular products that I was able to access. So that doesn't necessarily always mean the biggest name. This is something that I personally learned from like last year and the year before's episode, where I was really trying to go and talk to, the face of the new product. So the person whose name is on the side of it or whatever. Sometimes it makes sense to talk to that person. Other times, not so much, because there are certain situations where if you want to talk to somebody about a new product, the pros are not always the best resource, because so many times you might walk up to a booth that's releasing a brand new product, and yes, they have their pro there, but they also have the product designer there. They also have their staff members there. So many times people flock to that pro angler because it's a name that people recognize. They think it's going to get more clicks and more downloads and that kind of stuff. But a lot of times that person is not the best resource in the booth if you want the nitty gritty information about the product. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they have a very heavy hand in the design of that product. But other times, if you want a complete rundown, the pro isn't always the best choice. So in fact, here's a little sneak peek even of like how the soup is made at ICAST. No names here, obviously, but just to kind of lend some credence to what I'm talking about here, some of those videos that you see on YouTube or social media, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, of the pros doing like a 30 or 60 second promo on a particular product, so many times over the past week, I saw pros having to cut those promos on products they didn't even know existed 2 minutes before the video started. I saw it with my own eyes, and not just a couple times, I saw it a lot. The companies would wrangle up their pros, they would show them the product that they'd probably never seen before or didn't know a lot about, they'd give them the talking points real fast, they'd help them practice for a minute and then slap a microphone on them and start recording. And then these pros have to cut that promo telling you that you need to buy this product. So you see a lot of that if you really pay attention to what's going on at some of these types of trade shows. But they're pros, they're doing their job, and the marketing teams at these companies are doing theirs as well. That's how the world works. It's not a shot at anybody. That's how they all make a living. That's how you sell product. That's how you run a company. I get it. Pros are there to help these companies promote their products. It's part of the job. But I mention this to help you see that sometimes those guys just aren't going to be the best resource to talk to about a particular product. They're trying their best. They're doing what their job requires, but sometimes they're just not going to help you better understand the difference between like the gear toothing from last year's spinning reel to this year's spinning reel. The company and the designers and the product engineers, on the other hand, that could be in that booth can tell you about that. So today we get a good mix of insights from pros and companies across a whole array of rods, reels, baits, and other products. Okay, I think that sets the stage pretty well here. Let's do this. Let's ride down the escalator together and walk into the ICAST showroom. So the first booth that we're going to stop at as we walk into the showroom is going to be Rapala. So Rapala had a massive booth decked out to the nines, laid out the exact same way that it was last year for the initial launch of the Rapala Crush City Customs. But this year, it was highlighting the second wave of Crush City baits. So last year, we had 5 shapes that were unveiled as part of the Crush City lineup for the very first time: the Mayor, the Freeloader, the Ned BLT, the Cleanup Craw, and the Bronco Bug. And for anybody that thought these plastics might just be a flash in the pan type thing, I think the past year has really proven that that's not the case. I think these Rapala soft plastics are probably here to stay. The Freeloader in particular has proven to be a fan favorite for a variety of techniques, frequently selling out of popular colors like gizzard shad all over the country. So now we get the second generation of Rapala Crush City baits that are being introduced to the public for the first time. And to introduce the lineup here at Tackle Talk, we have a gentleman that's won quite a bit of money on these baits. One of these baits in particular, it is the one and only Mr. Dustin Connell. So we're going to start right here with his favorite in the lineup.
All right, what's up, all my Tackle Talk podcast fans out there? This is called the Mooch Minnow, okay? And from Crush City. this bait has won over $600,000 in this season alone. So it's only been out 1 year. It's not available to the public yet, but this is the official launch of it. And what's cool about this, it is TPE material, and you can catch a lot of fish on it. It's a really subtle action of that tail. You can actually shake, we've heard of the minnow shaking craze. Everybody's heard about it. I've done very well doing that, but this bait is perfect for that. You can catch a lot of fish on it. It's very subtle. It has a little tab at the end of the tail, and it really gives it like a real natural action as a shad swimming. If you think about it, a shad doesn't swim with a tail like this. Not very often, especially, something this small. So it's super natural. You can don't have a lot of resistance as it's falling. So I won Lay Lake on it, Red Crest. I won Toledo Bend on it. I caught 7-pound largemouth using it. It's just perfect size. So this bait will be available in the fall, and it's new from Crush City. We also have 3 other new baits. This is the Janitor. This is a drop shot bait. You can shaky head, Nico rig. We have the Hedgehog, creature bait, really cool for Carolina rig, flipping style stuff. And then you have the Pig Stick, which this is a stick bait, but it falls a little bit faster and it has a lot thicker density. You can see it on 4-phase sonar. So that's the 4 new baits from Crush City this year. They're available out this fall.
Okay, so there you heard DC introduce the 4 new Crush City baits. So let's talk about each of these in particular. The first one is the Mooch Minnow, and this has been highly anticipated. It's a shaking minnow bait that's generated a lot of attention because of the success that both Dustin has had on it as well as Jacob Wheeler, dominating the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour in large part with this particular bait. So what is it? Well, simply put, it's a small, finessey sort of straight tail minnow. And you're probably saying after hearing that, but Andrew, the Crush City lineup already has a straight tail minnow, the freeloader that came out last year. That is correct. This is like the finessey little brother of the freeloader. It's smaller, it's wigglier, if that's a word. It's got a daintier tail that droops way more than the freeloader does, and it has these 2 tabs that kind of jut off of either side of the tail, along with the straight tail itself, which kind of gives you like 3 little nubs and almost like a little tri-tail right at the end of this in sort of a T formation. So it is made out of that TPE material, which is stretchier. It's more elasticy than regular plastic, kind of versus the freeloader. And as DC said, it's much more subtle. It's much more of a true shaking bait. Now, the other thing I want to mention here really fast is that Wheeler actually told me this when I ran into him down in Tulsa at the Bassmaster Classic. He said, depending on the situation and the action that he wants out of that bait, he will actually cut off 1 or 2 of those little tabs on the tail, and that's going to alter the action of that bait. So I won't give too much of it away, but he showed me some videos on his phone. Super cool that you can sort of manipulate this bait a little bit for ever so subtle changes when you're shaking or sort of strolling or whatever this bait. So next up, DC mentioned the Janitor, and this is more of a drop shot worm or a smaller finesse worm. This is something that the Crush City lineup was obviously missing. Nothing too crazy here to note. It's just got some deep ribbing in it on the bottom half of the bait. The top half is sort of that turtle shell pattern that we've seen from some of the other Crush City plastics. And then the end of the tail is a little bit fatter plastic, kind of a smooth piece that finishes out the worm. So that is the Janitor. The next thing we had there was the Hedgehog. This is more of their creature bait, like a brush hog and creature bait sort of hybrid. It's got appendages galore. This thing, I think, has like 12 different appendages that I counted, if you count the smaller ones as well. So you've got like 2 on the top that make like curly arms. You have 3 small secondary appendages on either side of the bait, similar to like the cleanup crawl that has those sort of inverted secondary appendages. You have 2 inverted claws at the bottom of the bait that are fatter than any of the other appendages on this thing, each with their own secondary spikes off of each of them. And then finally, 2 curly tail legs at the very end. So this is their take on like a crazy flapper, brush hog type bait. But the thing that stuck out to me about this Hedgehog is that it is thin. Like, you can tell that there was a priority here for keeping this bait slim and slender. And then finally, you have the Pig Stick. And this is Rapala's take on more of like a traditional stick bait, Senko, whatever you want to call it. The thing that sticks out to me about the Pig Stick is that it is heavy. Clearly a denser option for someone that wants to throw some sort of stick bait or Senko. It has more give to it in terms of like pliability than a lot of other stick baits. If you hold this thing in the middle with your fingers, the sides are going to fall a lot more than most Senkos do. And I feel like this bait is probably very heavy on salt. I feel like it's got to have a big salt composition to it to make it that heavy, textured, floppy stick bait that they're going for. So if you're looking for something like that, here you go. So if we want to get into like my overall opinions on each of these baits, I think personally the Mooch Minnow is probably a great option if you're into the minnow shaken deal, which I'm not, so it's not going to be a really big player for me. But for others out there, it seems like a great option if you want to get out of that world of just carbon copy straight tail minnows, something with a little bit different tip on the tail that you might be able to manipulate a little bit. Again, I don't know. Minnow shaken's not really my thing, but there were a trillion with a capital T finesse forward-facing sonar minnows at this show. It was clearly the theme, I think, of ICAST 2024. Straight tail, forward-facing minnows or scope minnows, shaken minnows, whatever you want to call them, they were everywhere. And at least the Mooch Minnow has that interesting little tail design and a proven track record. So I guess thumbs up for the Mooch Minnow. As far as the Janitor or the Hedgehog, I can take or leave both of those. I don't think there's anything insane there, just some proven shapes that I think the lineup was probably missing. And then you have the Pig Stick, and I think this is different enough from some of the stick baits that I use at least that it'll be interesting to play around with. If I want to throw something weightless, but I still want to have a faster sink rate than something like a traditional Senko, the Pig Stick might play there. So that is the Crush City side of the Rapala booth. Now let's jump into the other big bait release that Rapala had this year, and this is the one that I was more excited for because it's a topwater bait. No forward-facing sonar connotation, not something that every other booth had, just a good old-fashioned new topwater bait ready for some fresh blow-ups. So this bait right here is called the PXR Jowler, Jowler, and it was designed by Jacob Wheeler over the past year or two. So he had a heavy hand in every aspect of this bait, and truthfully, I was much more excited for this bait than any of the other Crush City options. So while Wheeler was running ragged explaining the 4 new Crush City baits over and over again, when we caught up with Jacob, we actually decided to talk to him about the Jowler. All right, we are here with our buddy Jacob Wheeler. Jacob, you have a brand new topwater in your hand right now.
I do.
Walk us through the Jowler.
But all right, this is the deal. Before my obsession with everything else in bass fishing, I was obsessed with topwaters. I was obsessed from a little kid, throwing skitter pops and buzz baits. And so this was a really meaningful moment for me just because working with Rapala and being the first hard bait that I worked with them on, it's being a topwater. And so it goes back to me being a kid and just seeing big ones what I call big ones were 1.5 pounders in Indiana, big ones, blow up on topwater. And so over the years, I've never had a topwater that I felt was completely ready to go right out of the package. I'm always swapping hooks out. I'm always doing this, or I'm always wishing there was something different. And so that's sort of what we started on first, okay? First thing we did, profile the bait. Okay, I felt good about this bait. I have 3 hooks. It has custom VMC redline trebles on it, okay? These are custom designed exactly for this bait. It's not on any other bait in the VMC. This is a custom hook that was specifically designed. I'm a big fan of a feather with no mylar, a straight, clean, beautiful feather. I gotta have that too. So it's ready to roll exactly how I would fish it. Doesn't mean it's exactly how you fish it all the time. You can still customize it however you want. But this is Jacob Wheeler's baby, basically. Now, what it does more than anything for me is this bait is so easy to walk. So pencil poppers, there's a lot of different variations of pencil poppers from the OG of a cotton cordell down to, different baits from shower blows and cane walkers and everything else throughout the years. But this one displaces more water than any of them, by far. If you want to work this bait in 3-foot waves and water's clean, you can call up a smallmouth or a largemouth in crazy amounts of wind because you have to disrupt the surface. So that's why it's different in that aspect, and of course it casts for really, really far. It casts you can spool your rod it just goes. So it's cool. And then the last one, that 1-knot. So I'm obviously a big fan of the old OG Vixen, and so that was something I wanted, a real hard 1-knot. I've always felt like it generates more bites and pulls more fish up. So that was like all of those attributes into it, and then some badass colors. That's basically, so like that was like my mindset, and I feel like truly they knocked it out of the park. I do. I'm really happy with it.
Walk me through this mouth shape too.
So he has like more of an exaggerated mouth than anything out there, right? It's like a popper, almost like popping style. So it sprays like so much. That's why they call it the jowler, because the jowls of the bait. That's what it's the whole design from it. And the mindset there was like, at first in proto, I was a little worried, like, all right, is this bait going to be durable? Is the mouth going to be durable? Can I hit it on a rock? Those are always things you're thinking about, like when you're bringing a bait out. And it was sick. It was. Actually, some of the biggest bass I caught were actually in Portugal when I was like pre-passing with DC. Out in Portugal, I caught some like 6 and 7, like 5, 6 pounders on this bait there, and it was just cool, like that kind of stuff, like catching them in different countries before it's even out.
International approved, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, this is cool. Like I caught a 7 pounder on Toho on it when we were here for heavy hitters. Like there's just stuff like that. Like, and you're like when you get there's nothing better than a topwater. It's just not. If they said tomorrow, Jacob, you quit tournament bass fishing and you only get one bait the rest of your life to fish, you love the sport, it's going to be this bait right here. That's it. I just love seeing them bite a topwater. So that's just my passion.
And then what's MSRP and when can we expect to see it in stores?
So I think the MSRP is around that $18.99, $19. The BMC, having the premium redline trebles adds some price to the bait, but it's like I said, it is, you don't have to do a dang thing to it. And then you feel them hooks, they're so sticky sharp, it's crazy. It really is. So they're going to be available later this fall, and probably more around that November time frame. So some of my friends from up north might have to wait another year until they actually get to throw it. But for my friends down south, you can get that late topwater bite probably. And that's typically the best time when they bite a dang topwater anyway down south. So about November is about anytime after Halloween, it goes down.
Okay, so you can hear it right there. It's a bait that he's pretty passionate about, and if you want to visualize this thing, it's like a giant spook with a double-lipped, chugging mouth on it that basically makes the face of this thing look like a topwater snowplow. So the takeaways here, this bait is big. Like, for a regular topwater, it's large. It's listed at 5 inches, but just looking at it, for some reason, it seems bigger than 5 inches, which means not only is it big in size, it's big in weight. The jowler comes in at 15/16 of an ounce, so almost a full ounce topwater bait. So when Jacob says you can almost spool yourself casting this thing, he ain't joking. You can probably cast this thing like a dart. But what I love about it is that it fills a hole in your topwater rotation because it just absolutely throws water. This is not a finesse topwater. This is not a tight, covert walker. It shoves. This thing is a topwater bulldozer, and you can tell just by looking at this bait. So probably in the worst of conditions, I have a hard time believing that you're not going to be able to displace enough water with this bait to at least get noticed. And then when you're looking for that big bite or to just stick out from the crowd or even just get noticed by deep fish, maybe in less than ideal conditions, I'm going to try this jowler. I'm excited to actually pick one up. My only complaint about it is price point, because I'm a cheapskate. I will occasionally pay a premium for high-end topwater baits, depending on what it is, because I rarely lose them. They can last forever, but I want it to be a proven fish catcher before I drop like $20 on a topwater bait. But this is one that I will definitely pick one up and I will try, and it's truly one of those baits I was really excited for at this year's show. But other than that, from Rapala, we had some less noteworthy items too, like new colors in the DT series, which debuted 4 new colors, one of which I'm actually really excited about. They had a bream, which is a dark on top, brighter green on the sides, yellow to white fade on the belly. They had a classic craw and a crystal craw, 2 more natural craw patterns, and then they had what they called lemon shad, and lemon shad was the one that I was actually pumped for. It's a natural cream belly with like a gold yellowish side to it, and then a darker yellow and brown on the top. So it almost looks like it should be called like honey mustard shad or something, but I dig it. And not just because I love honey mustard, even though I do, maybe there's something subliminal going on there, but it just looks like a cool natural color that I haven't tried at many of my deep cranking lakes that I'm excited to give a go. They also had a new line from Suffolk that we'll probably talk about here a little later in the episode for another reason. They had the new PXR Maverick in a deep diving version, so that's the jerkbait they came out with last year, now in deeper models. They had some other random stuff, nothing too crazy throughout the rest of their launches. Okay, so now we are leaving the Rapala booth and we are going to head over to another big boy, Daiwa. And you'll remember 2 weeks ago, we did a full preview on Daiwa's launches for 2024 since they released them early, like 2, 3, 4 weeks early, which were the Daiwa Tatula SV100, the Daiwa Tatula SV150, the Kage LT spinning reels, the Kage premium bass rods, the Fuego rods, and the Laguna rods. So those were your heavy hitters from the Daiwa lineup this year at ICAST on what they released early. So now we get to put our hands on some of those for the first time and see if our predictions were right or if they were wrong. So let's start with the Daiwa Tatula series, the SV models, both in the 100 and the 150 size. And to introduce each of these two new reels, we checked in with Daiwa USA field marketing agent Chris Martin.
This is the new Tatula SV100 model. This is going to replace both of the previous generation models that were in line over the last year. This model is coming out with some tremendous technology. You know, we already had the hyperdrive system in the old Tatula 100, or the current model Tatula 100, I should say. This combines that hyperdrive technology, the SV cast controllability, and brings it a step ahead with SV Boost. So the SV Boost system is the newest technology in the SV category. So what Boost is basically a multi-stage cast control. So on the initial outset of that cast, you're going to get that cast control that you're familiar with coming from an SV. But guys want to get more distance with their SV. As much as they want that control, they still want more distance. And that's what the Boost does. So like I said, it's a multi-stage. At that first stage, you get that cast control, preventing the backlash. Once the spool stabilizes, it reduces the influence of that magnetic braking system, so you're still getting a little bit of control, but more freedom of that spool to continue to rotate, allowing you to get that longer distance cast. That combined with the hyperdrive system, buttery smooth rotation, as well as, like I said before, that hyperdrive system, that gearing, that 3-point contact allows for that buttery smooth rotation, but also spreading that pressure out, giving it longer gear life. Critical for those higher gear ratios, that 8.1 to 1 that everybody seems to love and hate because it gets rough over time. With the hyperdrive system no longer a factor. Now, that's specifically going to come into play when we're talking about the new Tatula SV150. So this is the new SV150 size model. This is the first Tatula 150 that we've introduced SV technology into. So you might ask, on a 150, why do you need SV cast control, right? I mean, you're already going to be throwing big baits. Well, yeah, throwing big baits is great, but that doesn't mean that they're not immune to interacting with the wind or air resistance, or if you're trying to get a really, really accurate cast. That SV system allows for those guys that are throwing frogs, big buzz baits, things like that, that precision placement along with the cast control. So the 150 is going to give you that a little bit greater line capacity, allowing you for the use of 40-pound, even 50-pound braid if you want to, and still maintain that SV cast controllability. Now, it doesn't have the boost system like the 100, but again, we're talking bigger baits that don't need it. They already have the weight to carry it the distance you need to.
Okay, so Chris did a pretty good job right there of explaining the Daiwa language and the technology that they're putting into these reels in regular terms. Basically, it comes down to the SV spool helps you cast lighter baits, it's less backlash, and it's a premium, more user-friendly spool. So after talking to Chris, I spent a ton of time putting these two reels side by side, but also then putting them side by side with their predecessors to truly see what the differences were that I think you guys will notice. So the the first observation is that the Tatula SV100 certainly looks like it is the exact same frame as the old Tatula 100. And I say old in air quotes because it's only a year old. The new Tatula 100 came out at last year's ICAST. So if you remember back to our ICAST episode last year, the Tatula 100 was brand new frame, really comfortable in the hand. That was one of the products we really liked. I liked the contour lines, the ergonomics of that reel. So when Chris said in the interview that, quote, this is going to replace both the previous generation models, the Tatula 100 and the Tatula 150, I'm sure you could probably see it on my face if we had an actual camera on it, that I was visibly surprised because I thought, wait a second, you just replaced the Tatula 100 last year and you're already replacing it again? That seems insane. You just put a ton of work into this Tatula 100, a new frame that you guys engineered that you obviously worked really hard on, and then when I saw the new Tatula SV100, it made sense because it's the exact same frame. It's just a different color. It's more of like a glossy gunmetal gray type look to it versus the matte black that they had on last year's Tatula 100. But as far as the engineering goes, it looks like the exact same reel. So I couldn't find any differences other than color and finish on the outside. So that made a little bit more sense to me. They kept all the hard work that they did last year. They just put a new finish and a new color on it and then upgraded the spool technology. At least that's what it seems like. So this is less of a replacement in my eyes and more of an upgrade. But then if you go to the Tatula 150 SV, on the other hand, it is far more different than the current Tatula 150. From what I could see, the 150 SV is skinnier across the body of the reel. The thumb bar is completely different. The tension knob is completely different. Different handles, different knobs on the handle. The old 150 had a 100 millimeter handle. The new SV 150 seems to have a slightly smaller 90 millimeter handle, in addition to obviously swapping out the old spool for a new A7075 SV Boost, which is a 34 millimeter spool in the 150. So at the end of the day, the new Tatula SVs, both the 100 and the 150 sizes, are $220 as opposed to their old predecessors, which were only $180 each. So they are forcing a $40 increase on you with the new SV spools, and it sounds like you won't have much of an option moving forward because these SV reels are replacing the old Tatula and Tatula 150. So as far as my thoughts on them, I like the frame of the 100 more than the 150. And I understand that certain techniques and situations require larger spools and larger frames to feel different in your hand, but I just like the 100 better. Maybe it's because I have small hands, but comparing the two, I'd rather fish the 100 all day long than the 150. Now the 100 is going to be pretty undersized for certain things like frogging or Alabama rigs or something where you need a bigger reel. Then you're going to turn to the 150 SV and it's going to make more sense. But I will say the SVs felt better when playing around with them side by side with the current 100 and 150. I think it's a worthy upgrade. They clearly improved those two reels in the Daiwa lineup. Now it's just a matter of if it's worth the price. And at $220, you're creeping up there, right? The $180 price point was great. You're below like a standard Corrado, things like that. But at $220, you're creeping into the high end. And now you're obviously not only above a Corrado, but also like a Corrado MGL, which might be your biggest competitor with this reel. So time will tell, but my hat's off to Daiwa on these. They are truly great feeling reels that I think they did a really good job of tasteful upgrades, both on the 100 and the 150. Okay, next up here at the Daiwa booth, we got to play around with the Kage LT spinning reel. And I'll keep this one brief. The reel looks sick. It's about like the pictures led us to believe. That Xeon, whatever they call it, body, you know, the air rotor, air bail, the cork handles on the smaller sizes were a really nice touch. And as far as the feel overall, once you get it turning, it's a very smooth reel. But my only little tiny gripe with this reel is that on the startup, it's a little bit tougher to get started than I would say some of the other $250 to $270 reels here at this show. In fact, I think there's a reel in this exact price point that was brand new this year that performs a little bit better, starts up a little easier, that we'll talk about here in a bit. But that's not to say that it's hard to start up. Just when you're really trying to find those micro differences, that's the only thing that I could really find that separates this reel from another reel we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. But now we get to move on to the Kage rods. And these rods rods, the only way I can put it is they are sick. These are probably one of my favorite rods I saw at ICAST all week long. So with this rod, you get the SVF Nano Plus graphite construction, you have Fuji Alkanite K guides, premium cork handles, you get a 5-year warranty with it, and my favorite part of this rod, not only do you get Daiwa's exclusive air sensor reel seat, but you get probably the coolest variation of it I've ever seen, a super sporty, deep red version of that air sensor reel seat. So the entire reel seat is a very classy, elegant, deep red with some sort of flake in it, just barely enough to give it a really cool sort of textured look, and it looks like $1,000,000. But when you pair that with the premium cork handle, so there's no EVA or foam to be found on this rod, and it's an all black rod, some little Japanese symbols on it and writing for the accents, it is a completely sick looking rod, and it's even cooler in person than it was in the pictures. But on top of it, maybe just being the coolest looking rod I've seen in a long time, it felt great too. It's light enough, it's well balanced. I just wish it came in a split grip. Again, that's my only tiny little gripe here. I'll let it slide. It's my only complaint that they're full cork handles, at least on the casting rods. I wish they would give you a split grip option. But a really slick rod that Daiwa put together here, and the cool or not cool part, I guess, depending on how you look at it, is that this rod is, from my understanding, not available at your big box stores. It's a dealer exclusive. So I think that means you can't log on to Tackle Warehouse or any of those big websites and find this rod. I think you have to go through the smaller tackle shops, more mom and pop dealer type stuff to find this rod. That's where it's going to be sold. So tougher to get, tougher to find, probably not at your door in 2 days from your favorite big box store, more of like a boutique rod. But I kind of like that they do that, supporting the small tackle shops and independent dealers, helping them drive traffic. Again, I think that's how the Kage works, but a really, really impressive revamp of the Kage rods from Daiwa, and they come in at $199. And then really quickly, if we want to hit the Fuego and the Laguna rods, I picked both of these up. I played with them for a couple minutes, and I got to tell you, I was a little disappointed in the Fuego rods, but I was pleasantly surprised with the Laguna rods, keeping in mind both of their price points. My initial thoughts on the cosmetics of the Fuego rods were right. I really don't like the look of them. That oddball gray section in the middle still seems odd to me, but the Lagunas, for whatever they are, right, $39, felt extremely serviceable for $39. You can't find many decent rods in that price range nowadays, but Daiwa gives you a nice option here with the Laguna on those tight budgets. So that's Daiwa in a nutshell. I think the Tatula SV100 and SV150 are both really nice upgrades from the previous generation, but you're obviously paying a $40 premium for those upgrades in a fairly competitive price range. I think your Kage reel is cool, especially if you're one of those guys that likes to have different, cool, unique things that your buddies probably don't have. Then that Kage is right up your alley. But the Kage rods, I actually think were the star of the show for Daiwa. As much as people were focused on the SV100 and the SV150, I would really put the redesign of the Kage above both of those. Cosmetically, it's a gorgeous rod. It's well priced at $199. It's more of a special release only, available through small Daiwa dealers. It's light, it's sensitive, it looks wicked cool with that reel seat. The Kage premium bass rods, I think, were the standout to me from Daiwa. Okay, everybody, next up here, we are going to head over to the land of Rather Outdoors, who is the parent company of both Lew's and Strike King. So we're going to stay on the rod and reel train here for a second. We're going to start with Lew's. Now, I'm always trying to be honest with you guys. I am not a huge Lew's guy. I just never really have been. The reels are nice, but I think the frames and the shapes of the reels always seem a little bit basic and a little outdated to me. The rods are nice, but they're kind of the opposite, where they seem to be catered to such a younger crowd. So there's a lot of flashy rods in the Lew's lineup, a lot of interesting color choices, interesting grip choices. I'm not a big wind grip fan or tacky rubberized handles, which Lew's leans into quite a bit. But aside from all that, Lew's makes a lot of great products, and this year they announced a few reels in particular that I was pretty stoked to check out in person, because they unveiled a completely new braking system for this specific line of reels through Lew's. So to kick us off here, let's chat with Lew's very own Tony Merrill.
Yeah, we got a lot of really cool stuff this year at ICAST, and one thing we're really excited about in the new product showcase, freshwater reel, is the Custom Pro bait cast reel. You can see this thing is it's got a pretty vibrant color. You can tell this is different than anything we've ever done. And let me tell you about it here just a second. So this is a renovation of our Custom Pro. Like I said, we've actually moved it to a 30 millimeter frame platform, so it's more compact than the Custom family was. Still aluminum frame, carbon side plate, so extremely light. But the big thing about this that you need to remember is it has our new Paramag ITB braking system in this. And there's a lot of braking systems on the market. A lot of people out there doing digital, battery powered. You got to charge it overnight. This is none of that. This is completely free of brake shoes, so fully magnetic, but it's not just a regular magnetic brake system, like that's a normal thing. This acts like a centrifugal auto-adjust system, but with all the technology and different gadgets involved. So the way it works is you have the magnets in the side plate here in that system there, and this collar on the spool here actually shoots out when you make a cast and comes around those magnets and backs off towards the back end of the cast. So it actually adjusts as needed based on the speed of that spool. What does that mean? You can set this, you still got to set the adjustment on the side plate like you normally would, but this reel has like a 2 to 3 click spot once you get it dialed in to where you can cast whatever bait you've got and not touch the spool at all with your thumb. Now, I'm not going to say backlash free, right? Any reel you can backlash it if you do something to it, but if you really want to launch a bait out there, you can get significant distance without touching that spool with your thumb at all. It's a completely amazing system. So that's something we're really excited about. The Custom, which is basically a very similar reel, same tooling design on this frame. The braking system, it's that same Paramag design, just doesn't have that collar on it, but extremely effective as well. $279 on the Custom Pro and $179 on the Custom baitcast reel.
And then we've also got the spinning models beside us too.
Yeah, as you can see, we've got the family theme on the cosmetic going here. So on the Custom Pro spinning reel, these are both aluminum frame reels, the Custom and Custom Pro. This one has a couple more bearings and has machine gearing. Machine gearing is a premium feature on spinning reels. You get better gear mesh and better durability in life over the course of the reel. So $139 retail price on the Custom Pro, $99 on the Custom. So this just doesn't have that machine gearing, so that's why we're able to hit that a little bit lower price point on this. But both very nice spinning reels, aluminum frame, so it's not going to flex on you at all, going to be able to stand up to a little bit more rigor and load. So kind of, as you can see, the family launch here, the Custom Pros on the gold and the Custom with the darker black cosmetic there.
So last question for you here. Who is this line meant for as far as a Lew's customer? Like, who would you recommend to look at these new, Custom Pros and the Customs that we have in front of us versus some of your other?
Yeah, so the Custom Pros are the little bit more premium version here. This is definitely going to be for your more avid angler that's willing to spend a little bit more money to get that a little bit better technology, a little bit nicer design. Now the Customs, both extremely effective, but of course a little bit more efficient price point. $179 for this reel. So being below $200 on this Custom. Given what it is with the aluminum frame, carbon side plates, and that extremely effective Paramag RX system in there, a really nice reel, and don't even have to break the bank to go over $200. And again, the Custom spinning, $99 on that. I mean, that's a really nice price point that a lot of folks can afford and put it in their boat and take fishing, and like I said, not have to break the bank over it.
Okay, so there you have it. You heard about the new Custom Pro from Lew's, and it's a renovation of their older Custom Pros. It now has a new 30 millimeter frame on it, so it fits in the hand a little better, and it's got their brand new Paramag ITB braking system. It's fully magnetic, which obviously other reels have, but it's got this centrifugal kind of element to it that's kind of cool. So there is a collar that moves out on the cast, and then it's reined back in due to the magnets that it gets close to as it pops out. So it's like a hybrid of a centrifugal braking system and a magnetic braking system. Usually those two things are independent from each other. That's how you get a dual braking system, magnetic brakes and centrifugal brakes, both with independent adjustments. Here, you actually get both of them working simultaneously in a cool little configuration. And this whole thing to a Lew's reel is brand new. But it's almost one of those things you need to see like an illustration or something to understand because, obviously trying to describe it here audibly is not ideal. but they're like no brake pads, like, a centrifugal braking system, a traditional one that uses friction on those little tabs or little clicky things, inside your reel that you flip on and off. So something pretty cool that Lew's here is incorporating in that new Custom Pro that they're revamping. So that is a big selling point on these reels, is the Paramag ITB braking system, kind of an alternative to those noisy DC or electronic braking systems. It's sort of a hybrid here. So the Custom Pro that we're talking about right here is the reel that you've probably seen online that comes in that deep gold that you're seeing on social media and all those places, and it comes in at $279. And then they're also giving you an option that's just the custom, which is the black version of this reel. It's less expensive at $179. You still get the Paramag braking system, but it doesn't have that collar that shoots out and really makes that Paramag ITB braking system and the Custom Pro so cool. So from our conversation here and from my understanding, I think the Custom Pro, the expensive version with the full new ITB braking system with that internal collar, is the cool new kid on the block with their newest technology. So I think if this system works as well as Tony claims it does, this could be a great alternative for you folks that like DC reels. You like that ultra refined braking capability to cast lighter lures, to battle wind, to be very precise and dialed with your braking technology, but you can't stand the DC whine. This reel doesn't have that. This reel sounds like a normal reel. So the Custom Pro from Lew's should give you that exceptional control that you're looking for without all the annoying parts of a DC reel or an electronic reel. So that piqued our interest. Obviously, it's pricey at $279, but I mean, this is only like $50 now at this point above a Tatula SV. So a lot of these new reels that are the cool unveilings this year are kind of sort of in the same price point in the same area from your big boys. So I know that's not a price bracket that a lot of us are in very frequently, myself included. Buying, $300 reels or whatever is not my MO most of the time. But if you are coming from a guy right here that doesn't throw a ton of Lew's reels, the Custom Pro does seem pretty cool, and you can tell that the Lew's team put a lot of work into this one. So now you're probably saying, but Andrew, what the heck, right? $280 reel. Where's the reel for me? Where's the reel for the everyday working guy that I can get excited about, where I don't have to drop $200, $300 on a single reel? Well, I've got one for you right here from Lew's. Another reel that I was really impressed with from Lew's was a spinning reel, actually, and it's their newest iteration of the Lew's Speed Spin. So this reel is priced at $59.99, and it feels worth every darn penny of that. It's sleek. The redesign did away with the old black body and the black spool, and it's now sort of almost like a beige shade of gray. I know that's not doing it justice. That doesn't sound cool. That probably wasn't the right way to say it. Like maybe like a light muted gray. Let's go with that. And they brought this reel into 2024 with more of a matte gray look to it versus more of a shiny finish. So it feels really solid on the wind. It doesn't have that typical, air quotes right here, cheaper feel to it that you get with a lot of sub $60 spinning reels nowadays. This is in a class with like the Fluger President, I would say maybe like the Daiwa Regal, two of the better reels in this $60 price point. The new Lew's Speed Spin is right there with them. A very nice update to the Speed Spin for you budget conscious guys and gals out there. Okay, now on to the rod side of Lew's. I want to highlight two of the rods in particular that I really liked, both of which you aren't going to find that typical, flashy red or yellow or white speed stick look to them. These are classy rods, one for a little bit of everything, and one that is going to help solve one of the most frequent requests that we get from people when they're rod shopping. So first here is the brand new Lew's LFS series of rods. New from Lew's, the LFS series comes in 29 different models, 14 casting, 12 spinning, and 3 crankbait models. So they're going to retail for $129, so a very affordable, tournament-ready rod. They're a very classy-looking rod from Lew's. You've got the Lew's proprietary LFS X3 blank. You have Lew's exclusive reel seat, the full contact seat for the casting rods, plus that Comfort Plus grip, I think they call it, for the spinning rods. You've got diamond polished Fuji Concept O guides, and you know me, my favorite, there's a premium split grip cork handle. And for those of you that are always complaining that there should be more handle above the spinning reel than below the spinning reel, these spinning reels give that to you too. More cork above the reel for more comfort versus going quickly to the blank like some other spinning rods do. Personal preference, I suppose, but this rod does give you that. So they're sharp looking, they're dark rods, a tiny hint of blue in the finish. They're nice blonde corks on the handles. Honestly, if you covered the name on these rods, I would think they at least look more like something like a St. Croix, like a classic looking St. Croix, than they do look like a Luz. So they really catered, I think, to a more mature buyer with this one, and it shows. So a great looking rod, great feeling rod for $129, the Luz LFS series casting and spinning rods. And then the last rod I want to hit here really fast from Luz is the Luz Speed Stick Traveler. One of the most frequently asked questions I think we get when people are rod shopping that I don't really have a good answer for a lot of times is, what's a good travel rod? I don't know, right? I've never owned a travel rod. I've never even demoed a rod that breaks down into more than 2 pieces. And travel rods are usually 3 pieces or more, so they break down really small so you can travel with them easy. Well, Luz is coming out with the Luz Speed Stick Traveler, which is a 3-piece rod. And again, we get a classy, clean, dark rod, very minimal sort of olive green wrapping accents, 3 powers. We have a 6.6 light, a 6.6 medium light, and a 6.6 medium, all in fast actions, all in spinning rods, and they've got that premium IM8 graphite blank. They have a rear locking reel seat, they have cork split grips, and Fuji Concept O guides, and the best part, they're only $99, and they come with a premium hard-sided travel tube. So a great feeling 3-piece rod at a $99 price point with a travel tube, and I think this is probably going to sell really well if they market it right, because it's something that a surprising number of people are looking for these days, a high-quality travel rod at a budget price point. So hats off to Luz, a couple really cool offerings from Luz this year at ICAST 2024. All right, everybody, we'll get back to the episode here in just a second, but first, we are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium Batteries. And we obviously just got back from ICAST. It was great to hang out with the Dakota Lithium folks. They had a great booth there. We got to sit there and talk some batteries with some of the folks that walked through, and we got to show off some of my favorites. The 24-volt, 60-amp-hour is my lifesaver. It's my go-to kayak battery for anything and everything motors, so I run my NK180 off of that. I also have a 12-volt, 46-amp-hour in the front of my kayak that can run all of my electronics, everything I need all day long. That right there is why I love Dakota Lithium. They're twice the power of traditional batteries at half the weight. They charge up to 5 times faster, last up to 4 times longer. They have 100% US-based customer support that I have used before, and they are fantastic. And they come with a whopping 11-year warranty. And we can save you money. You can use code TACKLETALK5. Not only does that help us here at Tackle Talk and let Dakota Lithium know we sent you their way, but also you save 5% off your battery purchase. Again, that's code TACKLETALK5 over at www.dakotalithium.com, the official lithium battery of Bassmaster. Okay, so that is Luz. Now let's move over to the bait side of Rather Outdoors, which is Strike King. And Strike King did have a lot of new baits they released this week, and I think I have some fairly strong opinions on a few of them that we'll save toward the end of our Strike King conversation here. So let's walk around the booth here. First, we had their new homing minnow, is what they call it. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, there were 100 different forward-facing sonar minnows at this show. We talked about it when we talked about Rapala. They were everywhere. It was probably the biggest theme or trend or whatever you want to call it of the entire show. Every company and their mother is coming out with a finessey, slender, straight tail or boot tail minnow that they're marketing to forward-facing sonar uses. Everyone. So from here on out, I'm not really going to go over them. One, because I don't really even use forward-facing sonar. I have it, but I suck at it. I don't even bring it with me 90% of the time. I don't like using it. It frustrates me. I would rather go out and just fish the way that I want to fish. But two, they're all extremely similar, and it's going to start to get redundant. So we're going to skip over the homing minnow and the pinger minnow here from Strike King, and we're going to jump straight into the Hardliner 57. And this is a bait that looks like a flat-sided balsa bait, but it's not. It's actually plastic. It kind of looks and even feels, right? It can kind of trick you a little bit for a second. It looks like a wooden bait, but I promise you it is plastic, and one shake of the bait and you're going to hear it because it has 2 BBs inside. One of which is free running throughout the entire inside of the bait for a rattle. The other one is sort of locked into place right in the middle of the bait on the bottom side, I'm assuming for more of a weighting purpose. But it's got a circuit board lip, again adding to that old school flat side look and action to it. And this bait was clearly made for early season cold water conditions. This is going to have that real tight wobble, real tight range of motion to it versus some of your wider crankbaits. And I believe it was designed by KVD, or Kevin had a big part in it, and they claim they've worked on it for a couple years now. So this Hardliner 57 is going to run you $8.99. I'll be sure to pick this one up. This is one I'm excited for, and I'm going to give a shot. Okay, the next thing here, they did have a re-release of the Wake Shad at $11.99. It's jointed wake bait. I can kind of take or leave this one. It is a re-release. The next and sort of odd thing that they had that I'm kind of curious about is the Tour Grade Fluoro Spin. Now, I could be wrong here, but I don't think I've ever seen an underspin like this before. If there is something like this out there, please let me know. I haven't seen it before. I guess there could probably be something, in Japan or something, but I don't think I've ever seen anything over here stateside like this. So what they've done is they've taken their Strike King jig head and they've made it an underspin, but instead of the blade being attached by a wire hanging below the bait like every other underspin is that I own, it's attached with a pre-tied piece of fluorocarbon. So no wire, it's actually just a blade hanging down below the head attached by fluoro. So you can move it back and forth. There's maybe like, a half inch of fluorocarbon that comes off the bottom of this bait, and then it just ties directly to an underspin blade. Very unique, very cool thought. I just don't know how well it's going to perform. The beauty of a wire on a traditional underspin is that it makes it more sturdy to withstand some of that water pressure and keep the blade truly hanging down under your trailer versus just riding up into it. So I could see this either being awesome or a complete dud if the blade just wants to ride up too far, but I would assume since it's being released that it was tested enough that that doesn't happen, but who knows, right? Either way, really cool idea. The Tour Grade Fluoro Spin from Strike King. Some other things they had there, they had the new Rage Buzz Minnow, which is a new soft plastic topwater lure from Strike King in the Rage lineup. It kind of looks like a frog-shaped body a little bit with this super fat Rage Shad tail on the end of it. Obviously made for just burning across topwater. They also had new sizes of the Luau Crawl, the Rage Hawk, the Zeus Worm, and then we get into two of the big releases from Strike King. We had one bait called the Evader, and the other one called the Final Copy. And I've known about these two baits for a few months now. These are two of the baits when we were talking about, that we don't do spoilers a few weeks ago, and, we don't talk about things we've been sort of known about for a while because the companies aren't ready to release it. These were a couple of things we were talking about, right? And I was very interested to see how the fishing world responded to these two baits in particular. So let's hit the actual bait side here for a second, and then I'll briefly probably get on my soapbox for a second about these baits. So let's start with the Evader. The Evader is plain and simple Strike King's copy of a Jackal Riser. And I don't say that lightly. You guys know how I feel about all the knockoff crap, and everybody throws it around all the time. People think everything is a knockoff. But everything that I could see about this bait, other than some really small cosmetic things like the eyes and the gill line and stuff like that, this looks like a legit Jackal Riser. Now, I'm going to be consistent here, just like I have been the past few years. I'm not mad about this bait one bit. I'm not up in my feelings. I am not upset, crying, saying, how could Strike King knock off Jackal? And oh my God, I'm not that guy. You know why? Because it comes in two different sizes than the Jackal Riser, so you're adding variety to the marketplace. And two, it's cheaper. A Jackal Riser is $19, and it's tough to find. They're freaking sold out everywhere. These will be $13.99, and I'm assuming much easier to find in stock. So you've taken a proven bait, you've made it 32% cheaper, and probably much more available to everyday anglers here in the States. Fine. It's good for consumers. Morally, I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. We've said this for years. Give me a product that I want, make it better, make it cheaper, make it more widely available, or any combination of those three things. And as a consumer, I'm happy. That's just how the world works. It happens in every industry. This is not a new phenomenon or something that's just relegated to the fishing industry. And the same thing can be said for the Final Copy swim bait. So this is Strike King's take on a large magnetic harnessed swim bait along the lines of a Megabass Mag Draft, which has since spawned numerous competitors, including the Bass Mafia's Out Dangerous swim bait, the Berkley Call Shad, and others. Now, the Final Copy swim bait comes in two sizes, 4.75 inches and 6 inches. It has 10 different Strike King colors to it, and you're looking at a $10 to $11 standard MSRP for these baits. It also has a stronger magnet than something like a Mag Draft. It's also a little bit on the heavy side compared to its competitors, and it seems to run a little tighter than something like a Mag Draft, which has a little bit more wide roll to it. So again, the more the merrier. I'm not going to sit here and drag Strike King publicly for these baits, right? There are differences between these two baits and what's already out there on the market, even if you personally think they're too minor of differences. Now, what I do get a little peeved about here is the internet's reaction to these baits versus some of the other companies in the past. A great example is Berkley. We mentioned them a second ago. When the Call Shad came out, or when the Nessie came out, the internet did not stop coming after them for like months on end. Then when Berkley made the Credge, the internet called it a Jackal Riser knockoff immediately, even though they're two very different baits, and we've gone over that on the show already, so I'm not going to do that right now. But then Strike King comes out with a Mag Draft type bait that is more similar to a Mag Draft than a Berkley Call Shad is, and they even name it the Final Copy, and the majority of the internet just shrugs it off. In fact, I saw a lot more comments that were like, bro, no way, they called it the Final Copy, that's hilarious, right? Or, dude, what a troll move, that's awesome. That was the type of stuff that I saw when they announced the Final Copy. So, Company A gets the public outrage directed at them not once, but twice for air quotes knocking off a Mag Draft and a Riser, even though they made some pretty big changes to both of those baits before they released it. Then Company B releases one that is a blatant copy and then one that's pretty close and names it a copy, and we're just here for the lulz. So I guess my point is here, I don't want to tell anybody how to feel or not feel about certain things. I just like consistency. And again, I'm here for these new Strike King baits because they have small changes, because they're cheaper, because they're going to be more available, and I'm all for cheaper alternatives that make baits more accessible for everybody. So as we leave the Strike King booth here and I hop off my soapbox, I think we've all learned a pretty valuable lesson from ICAST 2024 through Strike King, and that is if you make something, like a harnessed magnetic swim bait that looks like some other stuff on the market, all you got to do is give it a funny name, and I guess there's no hard feelings. So that is Strike King in a nutshell, and now we are going to travel over to another one of the big dogs at the show, unveiling a few highly anticipated items here at ICAST 2024 as we stroll over to Shimano. So there are a few new releases from Shimano at this show. They had the SLX XT-A, which was solid. They had a revamp of the Chaos, which looked nice. They had some jerk baits, some Arma joint releases, but there were two products in particular that had the show quite a buzz, one rod and one reel, and I would say particularly the reel, which was the brand new Shimano Vanford. So here to walk us through the all-new version of the Vanford is Shimano's JP DeRose.
All right, new Vanford for this year. I mean, for those who experienced the first generation of Vanford, it is the MGL lightweight, super slow, light CI4 body reel that does everything for everybody in every situation, whether you're a finesse guy or an inshore salt guy. But now Vanford's been redesigned and it took on a few new features from Stella that really make a big difference. I mean, I'm going to start with some of the features for you. Infinity Drive would be the first one, where they've actually taken the spool shaft and run it right through the pinion gear, giving you more smooth and effortless winding under load. They put the Duracross drag washers in this, which is a woven carbon fiber drag washer. So now you've got the smoothness of felt, the durability across carbon. I mean, these drag washers are 10 times more durable than a felt drag washer. Infinity Cross gear, so that, Shimano's kind of rested its laurels on the cold forged aluminum drive gear that makes their spinning reels so great. This has got a cold forged aluminum drive gear. It's the Hagane gear. It's the Micro Module 2 gear, but it's got a new tooth pattern that disperses the load even further, giving you a longer lasting gear that feels a lot smoother. The last thing we could talk about would be the anti-twist fin, which is right up here under the line roller, which if you're a slackline fisherman, that'll help keep your line up tucked into the roller. So if you're doing a shaky or you're throwing a drop shot or any of those techniques, it won't have that line fall out and end up outside the line roller. So when you set the hook, it blows the bail open. So a couple cool features. The reel had one shift in sizes this year. There's no longer a 1,000 size available. So there's a 500, 2,000, 2,500, C3000, 4,000, and C5000 size. $229 to $249.99. Price stayed the same. Technology got even better.
Yeah, for those at home, can you expand on why the MGL is so important? That's something that Shimano has obviously hung their hat on lately, too, and it makes a big difference, but I think sometimes to regular anglers, they might get a little confused about what that actually means for a reel.
There's an easy way to separate Shimano spinning reels now. I mean, really, there's two lines of spinning reels. There's core solid, which would be like Stratic or Twin Power. The reels that have aluminum bodies or magnesium bodies, they're core solid reels. They're made for, tube cracking or throwing aggressive braid to fluorocarbon techniques. The other side of the Shimano family is the Magnum Light family, and Vanford obviously is part of it. So you've got reels like Miravel, Vanford, Twin Power XD, Xsense. Those are all reels that share the MGL rotor in common and have a lightweight frame like the CI4 Plus, that carbon interfusion frame. So it's important to have a low startup inertia rotor for when you have to do quick start and stops on your reeling. It really gives you effortless winding. You notice right away, if you took a Stratic, the new Stratic FM and the Vanford and put them side by side, they're twins. The reels are really twins internally. The difference would be the material of the frame and the MGL rotor. Spin the two of them, and you will know which one, if you were blindfolded, is the Vanford every single time.
Okay, so right here we start with the Vanford because it is probably the one item in particular I was most excited about heading into ICAST 2024. In fact, when I went down the escalator and entered the show for the first time, the very first thing I immediately went to see was the Vanford, because the Vanford is my everyday workhorse spinning reel here at home. Is it expensive? Yeah, it's expensive, but it's an extremely comfortable and light reel, great for handling finesse and heavier applications both. It's got great drag, and it's become one of my all-around favorites. So when they announced the new Vanford, that's a big deal to me personally. So you heard JP talk about it right there, some of the changes that are coming to the new Vanford, but long story short, they're passing down some of the technology that's in their Stellas right now to the Vanford in 2024. And that's important because a Stella is an $800 spinning reel. Yes, you heard that right. A 2500 size Stella is $799. So if we can get some of that technology passed down to a $249 Vanford, that's a win for us all. And you get a lot of it here. You get the Infinity Cross, you have the MGL rotor, obviously, you have the Infinity Drive, the Duracross drag, lots of performance improvements to an already great reel. And in the hand, as you spin this reel and you really start and stop it compared to some others on the show floor, it's just simply one of the best spinning reels in the room. Very rarely do we have the chance to use hundreds of reels in one room within minutes of each other, but when you do, the small differences really stand out. So earlier, when we talked about the Daiwa Kage, I said that the startup isn't as effortless as I'd like it to be for $250. This is what I'm comparing it to, the $250 Vanford. And side by side, the Vanford is a more effortless start and stop. But even above the hood, you get some really clean upgrades. So now instead of being, 70-30 black to red, it feels more like 90-10 black to red. So very small red accents, just a classier blacked out look to it with a little less red. So overall, I'm very happy with the upgrades to what might be my favorite spinning reel. And it just seems to be getting better and better. Also with zero price increase. Everybody else is slowly inching up those prices. The Vanford is still staying at $249 across the board at all sizes. So then the other big release that Shimano had at this show was the brand new Poison Adrena rods. And to give us the lowdown on those, we go back to JP.
Yeah, so new redesign for Poison Adrena. There is a bunch of models that came out specifically for the North American market. And the nice thing is they've done some things really cool that I like they've got two glass models, they got two solid tip models. So if you're a scoper, you're doing the shake and bake, the mid-stroll, whatever you want to call it, or you're using baits like Ned where you want to inflict a lot of micro action. So they have a Taft Tech solid tip right in this section right up here, and you can see the way I'm bending that. It's right there. The first 4 guides have that Taftec carbon, so solid carbon tip. They've got a Spiral X core blank in them. So Spiral X has been our top manufacturing for blanks for a long time. This one goes one further and has a nano resin middle layer inside there, making it even stronger, even lighter. And then they've got full carbon monocoque handles. On the spinning rods, they have the CI4 Plus reel seat. And then they also, on the spinning, have Shimano's proprietary X-Guide, which is a titanium frame. You can see right there, Shimano's own design, so lightweight, super strong guide. So that is the new Poison Adrena. There are 2 glass models, there's a bunch of versatile models, there's a bunch of big bait models, there are 2 solid tip models, and there's even a BFS model. So lots to pick from.
Okay, so the new Poison Adrena rods right there, which I believe are being called Poison Adrena B, is a complete refresh of the first generation of Poison Adrena rods. You've still got a lot of the pieces that make the old Adrena so cool, though. You have cool actions. You have 2 of those models that actually have a special solid tip that's supposed to be better suited for baits that you like shake or shimmy. So you heard JP talk about that, obviously, where you're not moving the rod a ton, but you want that bait to move quickly and be more responsive. So he mentioned like Neds, shaken minnows, things like that. They've also got brand new blanks. You heard him mention that nano resin layer that's inside of that traditional Spiral X, which they're now calling Spiral X Core. So supposedly more durable, stronger, and still shaving off some weight. And then you have really super high-end components on this rod. You have the X guide, you have titanium framed guides, you get a CI4 Plus reel seat on the spinning models, that light and sporty monocoque handle that you're used to seeing on things like the Poison Adrena. It just kept everything that people loved about the old Poison Adrena, but made some upgrades to the blank, some component and cosmetic upgrades, and boom, you've got the new Poison Adrena. Now, the craziest thing I think about this rod that stuck out to me is the butt section of the rod. If you look directly at the end of the rod, where like the knob would usually be at the tip of the butt, sometimes companies put their logo on it or whatever, the Poison Adrena is actually hollow. It's not capped at all right there at the butt, so you can actually see inside the butt section of the handle and of the rod. On one hand, super cool. You don't really see that, and it actually shows how thin and lightweight those materials are in that handle. So that's impressive in that regard. But the only thing I could keep thinking of for me was, man, I'm going to get so much mud and dirt and crap inside there that it's going to be so tough to get out. Because every little bit of crud that gets in there can change the weighting of that handle and in turn, the balance of your rod. So extremely nitpicky there, but I'm one of those guys that I take my nice rods like in the river, in the kayak, in the creeks. They get dropped, they get thrown down in the mud as I land a fish. They're exposed to the same elements I am. They're not boat queens. They don't get put up in, a rod locker, every 5 minutes or whatever when I'm done throwing it, and then, put the rod sock on and really protect it like their precious cargo. They're abused. So an open spot in the butt, while super cool, may not be the most practical thing for a guy like me. But that's the Shimano Vanford and the Poison Adrena. Overall, I'm very happy with the Vanford relaunch. I will be buying one as soon as they're available. I can assure you that. The Poison Adrena, I think, will be very well received for people that already love the old Poison Adrenas. I don't think they did anything that would cause those people who liked the old ones not to like the new ones. But for $400 and that price point that the Poison Adrena is, it does take a certain customer to want to step out on a limb and try that for the first time. So I don't think this is going to be a lot of guys everyday weekend warrior rod. This is a higher end client, an angler that likes to have the best, likes to have the sleekest, coolest rod around. That's who the Poison Adrenas in general are kind of aimed for, in my opinion. Okay, so while we're over here at Shimano, let's head over to Shimano's sister company, I guess you could call them. They're owned by the same folks, G. Loomis. And oftentimes, G. Loomis isn't one to go all out at ICAST shows. They're usually in the back. They have a few racks of rods, just kind of to remind everybody that, hey, once you've walked around this entire show, once you've felt hundreds of different rods, here's the gold standard if you want to take a gander. So they don't have to be flashy. They don't have to hard sell anybody. They're just there. They make great high-end rods, and they just kind of remind you. They're off in the corner saying, hey, the NRXs, the GLXs, everything are back here if you want to take a look. So they did have a few racks. They, of course, had the NRX GLX Plus is out, just as an ominous reminder to folks in that room of what a rod can feel like. But then they had a rack full of their new GLX rods that came out earlier this year. And the GLX relaunch was a big deal for Loomis because this is kind of their step down from NRX, where you have an NRX for $650 and then GLX is $550. So a small step down in price, but if you remember back to the Bassmaster Classic episode, this was the first time that we actually got to see and feel those GLX rods, and man, they are scary close to an NRX at $100 cheaper. With the few upgrades that they've made to the reel seat and the components that we'll talk about here in a second, I think there's an argument to be made that a GLX is actually a better buy if you're in the market for the best rod out there right now. So to get his quick opinion on the GLX rods, we actually caught up with G Loomis Pro, Canadian Phenom, Cooper Gallant. All right, we are here at G Loomis with Cooper Gallant. Cooper, you have a semi-new rod, the rod that's been talked about for a little while now, but the new GLX, sharp-looking rod, obviously one of the higher-end G Loomises we have. What can you tell us about this new line of GLXs?
Yeah, like you said, sharp-looking rod, pretty-looking rod. It's a matte black blank. It's got the gold-wrapped guides. But the most important thing about this rod is the reel seat. It's got the CI4 Plus reel seat. Super comfortable to hold. This thing is lightweight, super lightweight. You can fish with this all day long, but in particular I'm holding the 893. This is one of my favorite models. It's a 3-power, so it's a medium heavy, and you can do a lot with this rod. You know, you can throw a chatterbait on it, big topwater baits like a spook. You can flip a jig with it, Texas rig, spinner bait. You can do a lot with this rod. It's a 7 foot 5 inches in length. It's got the length. I've always been a big fan of longer rods. It keeps fish pinned, gets them in the boat, casting distance. And man, the new GLX just launched a few months back at the Bassmaster Classic, and we've had such good reviews on this rod. If you guys are at your local dealer, just go pick one up and you'll see what I mean of how light it is, how comfortable it is to hold in your hand. That's the all-new G Loomis GLX.
So there you go. Two big differences, new models and a new reel seat, which is a very lightweight, super comfortable CI4 Plus seat, which is on the NRX and really kind of, again, starts to blur that line between NRX and GLX. So aside from the color scheme, which on GLX is black with slight gold accents, and on the NRX is black with light blue accents, the GLX is really a worthy adversary to the NRX, and you save like 20% off the price. So not a brand new rod, but it is a rod that came out a few months ago that's worth mentioning as we're over here at the Shimano and the G Loomis booths. Okay, everybody, next up here on our tour of the big boys, we have to stop at Pure Fishing. Now, Pure Fishing owns Abu Garcia, Berkley, Ugly Stick, Savage Gear, Penn, Fluger, Spider Wire, and more. But today, we're going to talk briefly about 3 of them in particular, which is Berkley, and then maybe a little bit more surprisingly, Ugly Stick and Savage Gear. So with Abu Garcia, anyway, I was a little underwhelmed this year. Fluger is Fluger, but this year it was really the Ugly Stick show with a large side of Berkley and then a nice surprise from Savage Gear. So let's start with Ugly Stick. Ugly Stick had probably the most influential release of the whole show in terms of number of bass anglers that this product is going to affect, and it was the redesign of probably the #1 selling rod and combo in the country, the Ugly Stick GX2. So the GX2 should probably have its own slot in the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame with the amount of anglers that this rod has influenced and affected over the years. And these rods have gone unchanged for a long time. And they were just these indestructible fish-catching machines built like they were supposed to outlive your great-great-grandkids. These rods are strong and durable, and they're so great for kids. They're great for anglers on a budget, great for people that are really hard on their gear. Now, are they ever going to be the choice of half of the Bassmaster Elite Series? No, they're not. But they're a great budget-friendly rod that you're not going to break unless you like run it under a table saw or something. But the GX2s are a very, very popular choice across the country. And here to tell us a little bit about them is a gentleman that Dave Mercer would call more slick than an Ugly Stick. It's Matt Robertson.
Yeah, man, it's the 50th year anniversary for Ugly Stick, and with that, we had to revamp the GX2. And yeah, some of the key features on the new GX2 is it's solid stainless steel guides with a PVD coating. You don't have to worry about inserts popping out or anything, and it's a hard coating on the stainless steel guides to ensure that it doesn't wear, braid doesn't break through the guides or anything. And also on the new Ugly Stick GX2s, you have the exposed blank. You have the actual blank whenever you grip the rod hitting your hand. That way there's no barrier in between it and your hand, which increases sensitivity. And also we have a rubber shrink tubing on the handle, which I've had this on the catfish rods. I've used this on my swim bait rods, and they've just incorporated that into the GX2 models. And hey, whenever you come out with the new rod, you want it to look good, so we slapped some makeup on this thing and give it a little new look. Threw some red and yellow in the GX2 logo. And these rods right here, I think, are $49. And hey, man, $49. And one of the biggest things is they went from a 7-year warranty to a 10-year warranty. So listen, you break it, no questions asked. They'll send you a new one, and you just can't beat a deal like that.
So the new and improved Ugly Sticks get, first and foremost, a cosmetic makeover, the first one that I can remember since they were released. I'm pretty sure these rods have been the exact same since this particular model was introduced back in 2014. So you've got about 10 years of life of this exact rod completely going unchanged. Well, it's no longer just black with some red and silver X lining on it. Now it's black with red and deep gold accents along the rod. They also got a new GX2 logo, which incorporates more of that gold into it as well. So you still get the clear tip that you're used to. You still get the foam handle system, but the handles now have this X pattern on them that's more rubberized to give you a little bit more of a grip on that foam. So just some small improvements to the grip. And then the Ugly Stick is improved by what the techs tell us is a stronger, more sensitive rod due to the materials they use. So that's all I really know, to be honest. I don't know how it gets any stronger than the old GX2 because they're absolute tanks, but they could improve the sensitivity a little bit, as any rod can. So if you're an Ugly Stick fan out there, which so many of us either have or do own Ugly Sticks, they're the most popular rod in the country, then get excited and look out for the brand new and improved GX2 coming to stores soon. So that was Ugly Stick, which is a big deal with this show just because of the sheer number of anglers that rod is going to reach. It takes a special angler to buy a $200, $300, $400 rod, and at ICAST, we're all fishing nerds, so it's not that weird to us to spend that type of money on a rod or a reel, but to the regular average angler across the country, those prices are absolutely absurd, and these new GX2s are much more attainable and up their alley. So if you're out there with kids or with your buddies once or twice a month fishing for crappie or catfish or bluegill, bass, whatever, an Ugly Stick might fit your needs so much better. So after we wrapped up checking in on the new Ugly Stick GX2s, we meandered over to Berkley to check out their new offerings this year. And Berkley had a wide variety of new products this year, ranging from traditional plastics to line to pre-rigged options to hard baits. So let's start with one of my favorites, the new Power Bait Clatter Crawl. So the Clatter Crawl is a pre-rigged sort of take out of the pack, tie on and fish type of soft plastic. Kind of like we saw, a year or two ago with the Megabass Sleeper Crawl that came out with a pre-rigged, more bulky crawl. This is a much different take, focusing on accurately appealing to what the Berkley team says are 4 of a bass's senses to accurately represent a crawl. So they say visual, sound, movement, and taste. So visually, it is a nice looking crawl. It's got a proportionately designed body, 6 small side appendages, 2 accurate claws, the little antennas off the face, protruding eyes. The texture looks really good. The actual physical design of this bait looks really nice. It's not like a cheesy lunker hunt crawl or one of those super duper 3D printed, almost too realistic crawls that goes too much for looks and not enough for action. But this is where this crawl has a really nice mix because it still has the ability to flutter those appendages. Now, is it going to give you like a rage crawl like flap? No, it's not. It's more of like a rolling flutter to these claws. But sometimes that's what you want. You don't always need a crawl flapping its arms at Mach 12. That's why there's 10,000 different crawls out there on the market for different needs. So as we look at the shape of this crawl itself, it looks great. Check. It also has a more subtle, natural movement than some other crawls out there. there, check. Now let's move to sound. And with sound, this craw actually comes with rattles built into the claws. So as those claws move back and forth, you get this nice thin clicking sound out of those claws. It's not obnoxious. It's not insanely loud at all because it's this small chamber where these two super duper tiny little BB things are trapped in. It's almost like a small plastic disc with two balls that can kind of bounce into each other and then off the sides of the disc. So very, very small metal BBs clicking against sort of a small plastic exterior, and it gives you that unique sound versus someone just throwing two regular sized BBs into a big hollow crankbait or a one knocker or even regular jig rattles, because regular jig rattles, those BBs are in more of like a long cylindrical tube that's inside those rattles that attach to the jig collar. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, but Andrew, Strike King already came out with the Rattle and Rage Crawl. Well, yeah, but one, that's not a pre-rigged bait. There's a lot of different features on this than that. But two, the rattle's very different because the rattle on a Rattle and Rage Crawl, one is actually inside the body, not on the pinchers, and two, it's a much larger tube that rattle is in. Again, not really tiny, small discs in each of the pinchers. So that's where it gets its name, the Clatter Crawl. Sound right there, check. And then finally, you have taste. And it goes without saying, this is Berkley. It comes infused with their power bait formula. So the guys at Berkley told me that basically the goal with this crawl was to appeal to as many senses as possible to the bass. Like I said, it comes pre-rigged, so the hook is actually inside the bait. The tail, where the jig head would traditionally be, is actually shaped like a craw tail, and it's lead, I believe, so you've actually got that built-in, natural-looking jig head, and then it's finished out with a surprisingly durable plastic formula. It comes in 8 nice Berkley colors, from traditional black and blue and green pumpkin to some cool options like swamp craw and green pumpkin cream, I think was a cool one that they had there. It's going to MSRP for $9.99 for a 2-pack. Again, remember, it's a pre-rigged bait, so it's going to cost a little bit more, but it's got that small little hoop over the hook to keep it weedless, very similar to the weed guard you see on like an Agent E, if you've ever seen that bait, and an all-around interesting bait here from Berkley. Now, my only gripe is going to be that right now it only comes in one size and one weight, and it's going to be about a 3.5-inch length. I think it was about a ½ ounce in weight. I could be wrong. I should look that up, but I think it was a ½ ounce. Now, hopefully this product does well. That way they can expand into different weights and sizes down the road. Okay, so that's the Clatter Crawl. After that, they had the Berkley Drip Minnow, which is, you guessed it, a slender, kind of rolling minnow bait. Like I said earlier in this episode, for everybody's sanity, I think we're all okay with skipping over the majority of your straight tail, forward-facing sonar minnows in this episode. Berkley also introduced new sizes and colors of the Stunna, including the Stunna Plus 2, which is an even deeper diving Stunna, and new colors like Stealth Minnow, which I really liked a lot, a clear matte belly fading to like a translucent light blue and then darker top. They had Wakasagi. They even had a pure French pearl. They also brought a new lipless crankbait to the market here called the Jack, which features a tungsten weighting system. They also brought back the Magic Swimmer in 95 size, which is a regular sink. They had a 110, which is a fast sink, and then a 125 size, which is a regular sink model. They also released unrigged versions of the Call Shad. So now if you've ever wanted a Call Shad body, but you want to add your own hook or owner flashy swimmer or big beast hook or whatever it is for more weedless options, now you can do that. Speaking of Call Shads, they also released some saltwater Call Shads, and let me tell you, the colors on those saltwater Call Shads looked money even for freshwater. So I think I'm gonna have to try some of these. They come pre-rigged with the top hook, it looks like, as well as the bottom hook that you're used to. A cool different take on that. I know the power bait formula is probably directed at saltwater profiles or whatever, but just the colors alone are gonna catch bass in fresh water. They had a mullet, they had a pinfish, they had what's like more of an off-white color called cold beer, and then they had a chrome flash and a silver flash, both with really sort of natural two tones to the bait. So those were very cool. And then one of the last products here, even though it's not new to us, because we went down to Houston in January to see this product product unveiled for the first time. It's new in terms of ICAST, and it's the Credge. So go back and listen to our episode in January when we went down to Houston for the Berkeley Science Symposium to hear all about the Credge and our thoughts on when this bait was initially launched. A pretty cool look, unique bait with an action that I've never seen or used before. So that was Berkeley. I think your standout here this year is the Clatter Craw. Obviously, new colors, new sizes on existing baits are nice, but yeah, the Clatter Craw was probably my favorite along with the unrigged Berkeley Cull Shad. Okay, and then really quickly here, before we leave pure fishing, I know this is a bass fishing show. I know we stick to bass 99.9% of the time, but you guys know I love muskie, and I love muskie fishing too, even though I don't do it nearly as often as I bass fish. But one of my really pleasant surprises of ICAST this year on the multi-species side was another pure fishing brand, which is Savage Gear. But it wasn't because of bass fishing, it was because of pike and muskie lures. So I won't spend a ton of time here because, again, I know that this is a bass show. I know most of you only care about bass, but just rest assured that if you're a muskie or a pike angler out there, Savage Gear has some really cool stuff coming to the US on that side. They had some really nice and impressive blades coming out soon, alternating blade sizes, nice designs to avoid twisting, interchangeable weighting, all of that stuff at the same or lower pricing than your traditional double 8s and double 10s, your Cowgirls and Showgirls and things like that from some other companies like Muskie Innovations or whoever. They also had something really cool on the tube side. So if you muskie fish at all, then things like giant Gizzet tubes or Red October tubes are very popular. Well, now Savage Gear has this thing coming out called the 3D Burbot tube, which has probably been available somewhere else already, but this is my first time seeing it, and I think it's just now coming to the United States. It is a lifelike tube bait with a treble on the front and then another treble sticking straight out the tail of the tube with a trailer blade attached, all for $24. So it is right in line or cheaper than a lot of other comparable muskie lures. They also had some really nice swimmers and paddle tails, so Savage Gear seems to be stepping up their stuff here stateside for you pike and you muskie folks. All right, and finally here, to wrap up our tour of what I would call the big boys, we need to pop over to St. Croix. And I'm not going to shy away from this one. I was pretty critical of St. Croix last year and really over the past year or two in total because I wasn't very impressed with the initial launch of the 7 reels when they came out, which is a St. Croix brand. And then I've been pretty vocal with not liking the new Trigon handles and the shape of those handles that they've been putting on a lot of their newer rods like the Mojos and the Physics line. So we got to get that out of the way. It's not that I dislike St. Croix at all. I've owned a lot of St. Croix rods over the years. I like St. Croix as a whole. I just haven't been overly impressed with the new products they've launched the past couple years. But it's a new year, it's a new ICAST, and I actually enjoy having my doubts proven wrong, and St. Croix did a fairly good job of doing that this year. So let's start with my favorite from St. Croix this year, which is a brand new series of rods they're calling the Black Bass series from St. Croix. And this is what I want out of St. Croix. This is all I've ever wanted out of St. Croix. This Black Bass line of rods is a tasteful, modern take on a classic St. Croix platform. I really, really enjoyed this line of rods. So according to the folks that I talked to over at St. Croix, this is the most comprehensive line of rods that St. Croix has ever brought to the market. Why? Because they're coming out with 36 different models in this line of Black Bass rods, 24 casting and 12 spinning. And that is a lot of brand new rods to bring to the market, all in the same line that's never been released before. So they've got everything from 6/8 mediums to 7/10 extra heavies on the casting side, and then everything from 6/8 to 7/10 on the spinning side. They also didn't put the Trigon handles on these. So +1 from me, grouchy old man that likes traditional round handles. Thank you, St. Croix. Now, they are EVA foam handles. They're not cork handles, but sometimes I have to take a step back and understand that some people don't love cork as much as I do, and some people really like foam and EVA. So they're premium EVA handles with a little cork rubber at the end of them, and the rod itself is a really clean-looking, silvery, dark gray rod with the Black Bass logo right there on the side. It is a nice, modern look of a St. Croix rod. So here's the moment of truth when you pick it up. And I tend to think that a lot of the older St. Croix are on the heavy side, But this line, the Black Bass line, is pleasantly lightweight and comfortable. It's got an SC3 carbon fiber blank, it's got an aluminum reel seat and nut, and they come in anywhere from $145 to $185 depending on the model that you choose. So a nice mid-priced rod that looks and feels like it could be a more expensive rod than it is. If you put this rod in my hand and told me it was $200 or $210, I wouldn't have fought you on it. It feels like a nice modern premium rod out of St. Croix. You get a ton of actions and sizes, so I can guarantee you that whatever rod you're looking for, whatever application you're looking for, there's probably something in the St. Croix Black Bass lineup for that application. So that's the Black Bass series, a brand new rod series from St. Croix. So after that, you have the new St. Croix GXR combos. And these are a combo that includes a St. Croix GXR casting rod and a 7 casting reel. The rod is an SC2 carbon fiber blank. It is a split grip cork handle with that EVA butt cap. And then you also get a graphite body 7 reel with it, all at $210. So call it like $100 for the rod, $100 for the reel basically. And even though that's a great price for a combo nowadays, this combo wasn't really my favorite. I'm 99.9% sure this rod is the old Bass X blank, and it just wasn't my favorite pairing of a combo, the rod and reel that they put together here. But that being said, for $200, it's tough to find any combo in that room for $200 anymore. So for younger anglers getting into it, for guys that want a backup combo, if you're just on a tight budget, the GXR combo is really well priced at $210. And the last thing I really want to highlight here about St. Croix is that as much as the handles bug me on the new physics rod, they did come out with a few new models in that line this year, and one of them is a 6'3" medium light extra fast rod, which is their like minnow shaking type rod. And I will say it felt great. So I'll end here at St. Croix with a little caveat that even if you don't love the Trigon handles or the physics rod and sort of that weird, carbon fiber type handle that they put on there, if you're looking for a mid-strolling, minnow shaken stick, I would recommend you at least pick that one up and feel it. It might surprise you like it did me. So that is St. Croix in a nutshell, and that kind of wraps up what I would probably call the Big 8 of Shimano, Daiwa, G. Loomis, Berkeley, Strike King, Lew's, Rapala, and St. Croix. Okay, the very next thing here I want to go over from ICAST 2024, now that we've kind of made our way around the big boys in the room, is 4 booths in particular that we had some pleasant surprises out of or something that caught our eye. So the first one we're going to stop at here is Lowrance. And Lowrance, I'll be honest, is the one brand of electronics that I've never owned. I've owned Garmin, I've owned Humminbird, I've never owned a Lowrance. But I'm going to roll this clip here and then we'll talk about it. But let's just say there was something at the Lowrance booth this year that I think people should be talking more about, but they aren't. So let's jump over to the Lowrance booth here and talk to the Vice President and General Manager of Fishing Systems with Lowrance, Jeremiah Clark.
All right, everybody, we're here with Jeremiah at Lowrance. Jeremiah, I heard a rumor. I don't know if you're going to tell me it's too good to be true or not, but this unit right over here, for what it does and for the price, I have a hard time believing it. So can you walk me through the Eagle Eye?
I'm super excited to show it off. I'm having a hard time believing it myself. I think maybe we've lost our minds a little bit. But the Eagle Eye is the extension of the Eagle family. It's a 9-inch screen, full IPS, means you can view it with polarized sunglasses, no problem. It's got the regular stuff like you normally have, chirp sonar, downscan sonar. Built-in charting was over 17,000 U.S. inland lakes. But the thing we've done where the hard-to-believe part is we are giving you built-in live sonar in either a forward or a down view. And this is all from a single transducer right here. This is showing the optional transom mount. All from a single transducer mounted on the boat, no module, easy to use, easy to set up, all for $1,000. The last part's probably the hardest to believe is that now people that have always wanted live sonar or maybe not been able to afford it or not have the space on the dash now have access to this technology.
So no reorienting the transducer at any point to switch between?
All in software. You just go pick the view you want, whether you want forward or down, right from the menu. And there you go. So now we got a forward view. You can cast out, track your bait, watch the bait come back in. Or if you're more of a vertical fisherman trying to fish, docks or brush piles, you can go straight to the down view and catch that as well.
And when are these set to be available to the public?
They're going to start shipping in October. We've already got a very big back order, so you may only see them at select customers until November, December.
Okay, so you just heard Jeremiah there talk about the Lowrance Eagle Eye package. So that is a 9-inch Eagle family screen. It has chirp and down sonar. It has mapping, but it also includes a transducer that can do down and forward live sonar without manipulating the transducer angle. The whole package giving you forward-facing sonar, down live sonar, a 9-inch screen, everything included is under $1,000. So for $999, anybody in the world now can have forward-facing sonar, and that is a huge deal. I mean, just for reference, I basically have this type of setup from Garmin. I have a 93 SV, which is a 9-inch screen, just like this Eagle package is, and just my graph and my basic transducer alone were $700. And then if you want to add live scope, you have to buy a $1,700 package that includes an LVS 34 transducer and a GLS 10 black box. So all in, you're looking at over $2,500 plus tax. Meanwhile, for a little more than a third of that cost, you can get a very similar setup from Lowrance now with this Eagle Eye package at $999, and that is insane. Unlocking the world of forward-facing sonar to everybody. It's kayak anglers, budget anglers, John boat guys, you name it. Now, for the price of what is like 1 or 2 combos nowadays, you can have forward-facing sonar and a 9-inch screen. So that, to me, is a massive deal. And I heard some people talking about it, but not nearly as many people as I feel like should have been. In a room where baits, techniques, and conversations are still dominated by forward-facing sonar right now, you would think that the biggest price drop on that technology in history would be a bigger deal. But it wasn't, which goes to show that most of the people out there in the fishing industry are about the big money. It's big boats, big water, and they cater to these upper end of bass fishermen. And a lot of times people like you and I get left out because we're not on that level. We're not big money to these companies. The fishing industry would rather show off and build some ridiculous, 50-inch screen for saltwater or something and systems that cost like $15,000 versus our little $900 systems, because they don't make as much money off those, obviously. So the big boat, big water guys are big money, and then us creek, kayak, and John boat guys out there are small potatoes. But not here. I want to make sure that you and the thousands and thousands of people that are listening to this right now, just like me, hear this, and it's more than just a blip on the radar. I mean, we'll get to awards here in a second, but this was like one of 3 things in the fishing electronics category, because there was basically nothing new here this year in terms of electronics, or at least not a lot that's, super noteworthy, and it didn't even win the category. So a $999 plug-and-play forward-facing sonar system did not win Best Fishing Electronics in a room where the entire conversation is currently revolving around forward-facing sonar and its accessibility and marketability to regular anglers. It drives me up a wall. But shout out to Lowrance, very cool package that will put this technology, the technology of the pros, into the hands of weekend warriors and more budget-conscious anglers, and I do really appreciate that. All right, the next surprise that kind of caught my eye here at ICAST 2024 was from NetBait. And NetBait, I don't think is many people's first choice when it comes to their all-around soft plastic company. I think NetBait makes some great individual baits. The Pack-A-Craw, the Pack-A-Chunk, those are 2 of the best craws on the market, period. They actually make a great tube in their STH finesse tubes that a lot of people don't talk about. But as far as an across-the-board plastic brand, I don't think there's a ton of variety and new flashy products when I think of NetBait. I think of your standard, reliable shapes, pretty plain Jane, but great, affordable, performing plastics. Well, this year, as I walked by the NetBait booth at American Bait Works, I had to stop and do a double take, because what I saw out in the front of their booth was a prominent display of like 6 brand new baits, all in the same line of soft plastics that NetBait is rolling out that covers a wide variety of applications. So we're going to pop in here and we're going to talk to Garrett at NetBait about the brand new line of plastics that they're calling HexTech.
Yeah, so like you said, we got a whole new line of plastics here through NetBait. It's called the HexTech series. So we'll start off with the Rascal. You'll notice we have some hexagonal pockets in this bait here. That is designed specifically for 2 things. It's going to hold more bait fuel inside this plastic, and it also has more surface area for a better return on forward-facing sonar. So we'll start out, we got our Rascal. That's going to be your typical flipping beaver-style bait, put it on a jig, whatever you want to do. Moving down to the Echo Shad here, this is your forward-facing sonar bait. Same thing as the last, got the hexagonal pockets on the side and the hexagonal head. That head is going to be a little bit thicker than your average minnow, so that's going to show up better on forward-facing sonar. And you got the ribbed tail there. When you just sit that bait there, it's just going to wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Bait fuel infused already, going to get you more bites. This is going to come in 2 sizes, 4-inch and a 3-inch. Next, we got the big bore here. This is going to be your hog-style tube hybrid bait. So this was kind of designed to be like a Carolina rig bait. You can flip this thing. You can do a bunch of different things with it. Now, we're going to the blip minnow. This is going to be your finesse minnow style bait. We got a wedge tail for really tight kicking action, super soft plastic on this. This is going to be available in a couple different sizes, but that covers your finesse swim baits there. Now we got the whiptail shad. This is designed to be your chatterbait trailer. So you put that on the back of a chatterbait, thing's going to go crazy. You got the thicker body when you hook it, but then back here you got a thinner tail section, and that tail is going to go wild on the back of that chatterbait. And the last one here, we got the Echo Craw. This is going to be your finesse style. You can put this thing on a Ned rig. When it gets really tough, you can punch this thing. It's got, minimal action, but it's got the floating claws. It's going to sit there, and those claws are just going to float. So that's the new Hextech series. We got a couple of new different baits, but they're going to be sick.
Okay, so there you have it. 6 different shapes that are coming out in the net bait family under the name the Hextech series. And they call it Hextech because, as Garrett said, the bodies have this hexagonal texture to them that gives them a unique feel, it gives them some texture, and it supposedly helps with scent dispersion because they're infused with bait fuel, as all net bait plastics are nowadays. And it's supposed to help you see them better on forward-facing sonar with more surface area. Now, I'll keep it real with you guys. I don't buy the forward-facing sonar thing. If it's a 3-inch soft plastic minnow, I would think the jig head that you're using is likely going to overpower any small 1 millimeter raised piece of soft plastic off of the side of the bait or something. Your 1/8 piece of tungsten or your 1/4 ounce piece of lead or whatever that's on the front of that minnow is going to provide the best returns, not the changing texture of your plastic probably. So I could be wrong, but I don't really buy that one. I do understand more surface area for helping disperse the scent that they infuse these things with better. That makes sense to me, but at the end of the day, it's about action and it's about shape. And these baits look far more modern, far more trendy than anything that I've seen net bait ever put out in the past. The Echo Shad and the Blip Shad, again, I can do without because, like we said, everybody at this show has their own version of a small forward-facing sonar minnow. I get it. Every company has to have one now, the way the world is going, but we're not really going to talk about these. The Rascal looks really cool to me. It's a flatter, wider type of craw, beaver sort of hybrid bait. That's probably the one I'm most excited for out of this series. You have the Big Bore, which actually looks like a tube in a brush hog hybrid, probably a great little punching bait. The Whiptail that they called it, I guess could be a cool chatterbait trailer. It's got kind of a rudder tail on it, vertical and flat. And then you have the Echo Craw, again, a little bit more of a slender tube-shaped craw with 4 appendages that look more like ticklers off the back than actual craws. So are they home runs? I don't know. I'm excited for the Rascal, their 3.5-inch craw beaver hybrid bait. I'm semi-excited for the Echo Craw and the Big Bore, and then I can kind of do without the Whiptail, the Blip Minnow, and the Eco Shad. So I know the forward-facing sonar guys out there are going to disagree with me, but part of this show is my opinions as the actual angler that I am. I don't ever really rely on forward-facing sonar, so a lot of these sort of finesse, shaken minnow type baits are just a little lost on me. But the last thing that I'll say here about the way that they presented these is it reminded me a lot of the Crush City launch last year. In fact, they even had sort of the same big 3D printed versions of each bait out in a line, just kind of like Rapala did last year. They have a modern sort of textured look to them, coming out with 4 or 5 at a time in a brand new line. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but I guarantee I wasn't the only person that walked past that booth and thought, that looks familiar, the way they're presenting those. It just looked very similar. No shot to netbait. Again, I like netbait. Just my observation, the first thing I thought of when I saw this launch. Okay, the next thing here that we're going to do on our list of smaller, which again I put in air quotes here, smaller companies that had a bit of a surprise to us this year was Big Bite Baits. And this year, there were 2 Big Bite Baits lures that really caught my eye. The first was called the BSE, which stands for Best Skipper Ever. And to learn more about the Best Skipper Ever, let's quickly catch up with MLF Hammer and Big Bite Bait Pro, Michael Neal.
We'll start with the BSE. And so, this, like you said, is very different. And that was kind of my reaction too, but it's the best skipper ever. So that's what it was intended for. A lot of focus is on the forward-facing stuff, but this is one of those baits that are for the bank guys. And the first thing you'll notice is one end is a lot thicker than the other. So you're going to put your hook in through the narrow end and come back out and use this deeper end. So when you do that, when it skips, it's going to have the thicker part out. And then when you pull it up, it's going to have the thicker part away from you. So it's actually going to kind of fall back into the cover a little bit, actually extend your cast into those shade pockets up under the dock. My way I'm going to rig it is just on a EWG style hook. It's got a hook slot, so it really shows you where. Not a whole lot of action with this bait. It's going to be pretty finessey, but these legs, when it falls, it does just have a little bit of a shimmer to the legs itself.
Okay, so there's the BSE, or Best Skipper Ever. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due here because this is something I've never seen before. And if you want to imagine this bait, just picture a tick, like one of those ones you find on your skin after crawling through the weeds for an hour, or a bed bug, or, one lice, or something like that. Just some big fat bug with really small legs. And then you blew it up to maybe be the size of like a ping pong ball or something. And then, lastly, make it out of really heavy soft plastic. And that's basically the BSE. It looks like a giant soft plastic tick. And what this bait is made to do is obviously skip like a rock. And from picking this bait up and playing with it, say what you want about how weird it might look, this thing is going to skip. I don't know how it could not skip. It feels like 3/8 ounce or a ½ ounce of just pure heavy soft plastic with legs and tiny little legs that aren't going to impede your skip. This thing is going to skip like a rock. Now, what it does on the fall is hard to tell. I don't really know how that's going to look when it falls down in the water. I don't know how hard it is going to be to get good hook penetration on this giant and thick of a soft plastic lure. I just don't know. I have a hard time believing that your hookup ratio is going to be great on this thing, but if you want a bait to just get back to the very back of that dock, I think the BSE will probably do that just as well as anything else, or better, which by all accounts is what this bait was intended to do. So the Best Skipper Ever in true bite bait fashion is $5.99 for an 8-pack, so a great price for how much soft plastic it takes to make this bait, and it'll come in 8 colors and hoping to be available sometime next month. Now, the second bait that caught my eye from Big Bite Baits was actually designed by our buddy Drew Gill, and it's called the Nico Rama. And if you know Drew, you know he's going to do a much better job of explaining this than I ever would. So let's catch up with Drew Gill to talk about his new bait, the Nico Rama.
Yeah, so the Nico Rama worm here, basically, I felt like, the industry as a whole, we've got a million finesse worms, a million different options and profiles, but I felt like as far as making a technique-specific bait, the Nico worm had not been attacked the way it should have been. And so I wanted to make a bait that fulfilled all my needs with a Nico worm. So this bait, we have a longer style profile, 7-inch profile. It's a little bit bigger than most of your standard finesse worms. You have that standard finesse worm shape of, that bigger lower section of the body, a taper, and then a bulbous tail, which gives you that traditional vibrating action when you pull it that you should get out of a Nico worm, in my opinion. You get the fine ribbing on the front side to make sure the action stays consistent. And you've got a flat side on the back, decreases weight while keeping the same density. And you've got the heavy salt formula, matte colors. This bait is absolutely armed to the teeth with super cool features. One of my favorite features with this bait, though, is this slick spot here. There's 2 O-ring divots, one above and one below. And these O-ring divots are visual cues for where you need to line up your hook to fish this technique. But if you put your hook below this divot here, oftentimes your bait is going to want to hop or drag as you lift it. which is really important with this technique when you're casting it and trying to cover water. And if you're bed fishing or fishing a target that you want to keep that bait in one place for a long time, that above divot is going to give you a visual reference point as to where you need to hook that bait to keep that bait in one place and allow you to shake it without moving the bait over distance and keep it in the same spot, which is a really nice feature with this bait. Reinforced nose for bigger weights. This thing is absolutely chock full of features that'll make your Nico rigging experience better, allow you to put more fish in the boat. And with the matte colors, the heavy salt, all of the super cool features we packed into it, this bait will absolutely be I think a staple in your arsenal. I know it will be for me. And try it out. You probably won't be disappointed.
So you can hear Drew's brain right there working to try and make a specific Nico worm. So it's a 7-inch worm. It's a longer worm with a lot more action. It's got a full flat side on the belly, really minimal ribbing on one side. It's obviously got a lot of salt. It's got that matte look to it, a lot of stuff that Drew mentioned. But the coolest part is that Drew and Big Bite basically made this bait stupid proof when it comes to rigging. So there are 2 slots for your O-ring and you can't miss them. Drew said basically one slot, the lower slot, is for covering water, and then the upper slot is for keeping that worm in a specific spot while shaking it. So a very cool take on a Nico worm, something that I think we all just think, I can, Nico rig any finesse worm that I have in my box. And you can, but Big Bite, with Drew's help, seemed to try and make a great Nico worm for your high-level tournament guys that want all of the small, minute features that they wish they had, but also a great worm for beginners, even showing you exactly where to put the O-ring with those divots. So the Nico Rama, again, is a Big Bite bait, so you know it's going to be affordable. $5.99 for a 12-pack, a great value worm with some super cool features on it, making it tournament ready or great for beginners too to the Nico rig, a very technique-specific worm. Okay, so that brings us to our last pleasant surprise booth here as we were walking around before we get to some other things like awards, and that booth is going to be Gomexis. Now, if you've ever heard the name Gomexis and it rings a bell, it's probably for one or two reasons. Either you know Gomexis because of Gomexis handles, which are one of the most popular aftermarket upgrade handles for bait casters out there today. If you want more torque, if you want better grips, especially for big things like big glides and swim baits or cranking, Gomexis is a very popular choice. The other reason you might have heard of them is because if you think back to our episode a few months ago with Matt Streichel talking about the fish that he caught multiple times as it swam, up and down 4 miles back to the same tree, I actually asked him about the bait that we're about to talk about, and he gave us his initial opinion after having played with it for a while, and that bait is the Gomexis Cyber Bait. So to tell us a little bit more about that bait, we catch up with Ellis Caudle of Gomexis.
Ellis, we have one of the coolest baits that we've seen in a long time. We've talked about this a little bit on the show already. Can you walk us through the cyber bait here?
Yeah, for sure I can. So this cyber bait is 9.45 inches. It has a bunch of cool features onto it, but we have something called the extra stretch feature on it. You press a button on the bottom of it, and you can actually pull this apart and extend the joint on this bait. This bait weighs 4.3 ounces, so it's right in the middle of your big swim baits. It gives off a really crazy presentation. It is a full metal, it's all aluminum. It has 3 interchangeable tails that you can see right here. Here's the 3 tails. And you also have the option to put a lip in right here. So kind of like your DRTs, it hides wear and tear, and it's a beast.
So for those that might not be super familiar with glide bait fishing, when you extend that body a little bit and you change that sort of range of motion, what does that do to that bait in the water?
So if you have it on the kind of shorter version of it, you don't have that joint extended, it kind of glides and meanders through the water a little bit. So it's like a longer glide, a little bit smoother looking. And when you extend that, it becomes more of a chop. So if you chop in the water, it's going really erratic, back and forth, triggering those strikes.
So there you go. Like Ellis said, this is an eye-catching bait if you've ever seen one. In fact, I would even go as far to say this might be the most head-turning bait in all of ICAST this year, and it's really still getting overlooked. So this bait is almost 10 inches long, it's 4.3 ounces, so it's a big glide bait, but it's not obnoxious in the world of glide bait fishing. It's a little heavy, but 9-inch baits now are nothing. I throw a 9-inch Nessie all the time for smallmouth in the rivers. So the coolest part about this bait, though, is that it's fully CNC'd in the body, and it's completely made out of aluminum. So this bait is durable, it can take a beating, it's also flashy and silver, but aside from that, it's chock full of features and customization options. So you heard Ellis mention two big things right there. First is the removable lip. So you can make this bait a lipped or a non-lipped bait. The lip is most likely to make this more of like a wake bait or a really shallow diving bait, but if you remove it, now it's a traditional glide bait. But my favorite feature of all has to be what they call exo stretch. You can literally tap a button on the bottom of this bait and pull the bait apart, and it stretches back and locks into place, giving you a completely different range of motion with this bait because you've now changed the angle of that middle hinge. So it is a modular type bait in more ways than one, and it's a very smart design. So range of motion and weight are the two most tinkered with things in glide bait fishing, and they've given you a bait that also has two different lip options and two different length and bend angle options all in one. And the price of this bait is $120, which for what this bait is criminally underpriced. You might think that $120 is expensive for a bait, but for a 9-inch, fully CNC'd modular glide bait, this bait should be priced much higher. There are guys making resin glide baits in molds that are held together by Lego bricks that are charging twice this much. So this is a very, very cool bait that I don't think is getting the recognition it deserves, so it makes our list here of pleasant surprises that we saw as we were walking around the show. All right, everybody, we'll get back to the episode here in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by Mossy Oak and Mossy Oak Fishing. And we just got back from Orlando. It was hot as the devil's house there in Orlando in July. I still don't know why we hold ICAST in Orlando, Florida in July. It's not exactly the most pleasant place in the world this time of year, but I'm so glad that I packed my Mossy Oak tech shirts. Everybody else walking to and from the hotel and the shuttles and everything, you're sweating your tail off. I was comfortable because I packed my favorite shirts. Mossy Oak tech shirts, whether it's short sleeve, long sleeve, the sun hoodies, whatever it is, Mossy Oak Tech is the way to go. They've also got great regular casual apparel on the website. They obviously have some of the world's best hunting apparel if you guys are into hunting as well. We are about to get to that time of year, so you might want to check that out as well. But you can go over to www.store.mossyoak.com, click fishing at the top of the page, and you're going to be pleasantly surprised the great fishing apparel that Mossy Oak and Mossy Oak Fishing put together. Again, that's www.store.mossyoak.com. Okay, everybody, I know that was a lot, but that gets us through quite a few of the booths that I wanted to share with you, but that doesn't mean that we're done with the products yet, because the next thing I want to do is walk you through all of the award winners in categories that are important to us, and then I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to tell you who I actually voted for and why. So as a media member, I actually get to vote on the new product showcase, both for all of the best of category winners, and then one final vote for all of the category winners for best of show. And then after we're done talking about the actual ICAST award winners, I want to wrap up the show by giving you my top 5 best in show that I saw from the entire ICAST 2024, and then my top 3 worst in show. So let's start with the awards themselves here. Now, there are something like 44 different categories that new products can fall into to win a best of category award at ICAST. And this is how you see billions of different winners with trophies at their booths and posting on social media that they won at ICAST. Usually it means they won their category. And to me, some categories are far more impressive than others. Like if you win best freshwater soft lure or best freshwater hard lure. That's impressive to me because there are hundreds of entries, it seems like, in those categories. Same goes with best freshwater rod, freshwater reel, all those things. But then some of these categories like best fishing novelty and wellness item, best fly fishing backpack, bag, or luggage, there legitimately might be 3 or 4 entries in each of those categories. And that doesn't even count all of the saltwater and fly fishing subcategories that, again, I just have no idea about. So every year when I vote, I only vote for the categories that I actually feel passionate about, that matter to me, and I feel confident in my pick as the winner. Now, I know a lot of other people take the voting way less seriously and they just go in there and vote for whoever, company X told them to vote for or whatever, right? That's fine. But that's how I vote. And it's worth mentioning that you can't just vote for anything. It has to be something that was entered into that category. So what happens is when you walk into this giant area in the convention center, there's one of every product that's up for an award and it's laid out on a table or in a protective case. So all of the reels that are up for nomination for best freshwater reel are all in one case, and you pick from those options in that case. So it's not every reel in the convention center, it's every new reel that's entered into the product showcase. So like every company really gets one entry into each category, I think, if they want. So it stops it from being like, oh, there's 12 Shimanos in this category and 5 Daiwas and whatever. No, there's like one of each in every category, their best new product in each category from the past year. So again, you get one giant case with like all the best brand new freshwater reels and you pick one. And you do that over and over again. You can't write anything in, you can't add your own, you pick from what's available. So out of the 44 categories, this year I voted for 9. I voted for best freshwater rod, best freshwater reel, best rod and reel combo, freshwater soft lure, freshwater hard lure, tackle management, custom tackle and component, motorized boating accessory, and electronics. So let's start with the freshwater rod here. Your winner, the actual winner at ICAST 2024 for best freshwater rod, went to the Ugly Stick GX2, which we talked about earlier, and I get it. It's going to be in more people's hands than anything at this show. It's got mass appeal, the likes of which nothing else in that competition had. So I understand that. But my pick for my favorite rod that was actually available in that list to vote for was the 13 Fishing Oath rod. So this rod is $99. It felt great for a budget rod in that sub $100 range. I almost picked the G Loomis GLX, which was by far and away the nicest, most impressive rod in that group, but I tried to take into account everyday anglers, and everyday anglers are not spending, $550 or whatever for a rod. For that price, it should feel nicer than anything else on that list. But my vote went to the 13 Fishing Oath rod, a new series coming out from 13 soon. Now we move on to freshwater reel. And in this category, your winner was the Shimano Vanford. And this is one we actually got right because I voted for the Vanford as well. Yes, it's $250, but it's not as ridiculous as something like a $500 reel or a $700 rod. Is it high end? Yes, but it's also attainable for a lot of folks. My secondary choice, if I had to pick one, probably would have been the Lew's Custom Pro with that new braking system, but I went with the Shimano Vanford. And then if we move to best rod and reel combo, in that category, your winner was the St. Croix GXR combo, which if you remember back to when we stopped by the St. Croix booth, it actually wasn't one of my favorites from St. Croix this year. So I actually picked a combo that I liked better and was actually even cheaper than the already affordable GXR combo, and I picked the Shimano Chaos C combo. That entire combo is only $149 for both the rod and reel. You get a Shimano Chaos casting reel, which just got revamped this year. It feels great on its own for like a $79 reel or whatever it is. And then they paired it with a Chaos rod, and they're giving it to you, the entire combo, for $149, which was a winner in my book. It felt great. I feel like this combo got snubbed a little bit, but that's okay. All right, now let's move on to baits. And if we want to start with freshwater lure, your 2024 best freshwater lure at ICAST went to the Berkeley Credge, which is a fine pick. I'm cool with it. A unique bait, despite what the internet trolls are going to say. I've never seen or fished anything like that before. It's not a riser. It's not a jerk bait. It's a morph of like 2 or 3 different techniques. I'm fine with that winner. But my vote for the 2024 best freshwater lure actually went to a bait that we just talked about. It was the Gomexis Cyber Bait. That bait was way cooler than anything else in that case, plain and simple, so it got my vote. If we want to go to best freshwater soft lure, your 2024 winner at ICAST was the Z-Man Shadtron LT swim bait. Again, I'm not mad about this one. It's they had like a 4.5 inch and a 6 inch line through available in, I think, slow and fast sink models. Cool little wedge tail on it. Very natural looking. I don't have a lot of gripes with that pick at all, but my vote for the 2024 best freshwater soft lure went to the Big Bite Baits best skipper ever. This is that giant tick-shaped plastic that we talked about earlier, made for skipping, for the simple fact that it was at least unique and different, yet practical enough to serve a purpose. So is this a bait for everybody? No. Is it even a bait for me? Probably not. I don't skip docks a whole lot. We don't have a lot of docks to skip, but for people that do and really need that extra, few feet on that skip to get to the very back, I at least see a purpose to it. And I've never seen or felt anything like that before. Maybe there's something overseas in the depths of Japan or something. I don't know. It seems like everything's already been done at least once, but I personally haven't seen it, and this was probably the most unique while still useful and practical in its application soft plastic that I saw in that case. So now, if we move on to the next category here, it is tackle management. And we got this one right too. This is one of the coolest non-rod reel bait things that I saw at the entire show, and it's your 2024 ICAST winner for tackle management, as well as our personal vote, the BKK Hooks OCD storage system. So this is essentially a large plastic tackle box that comes loaded with 48 different packs of BKK hooks. Everything from flipping hooks, offset worm hooks, round bend hooks, drop shot hooks, treble hooks, all like 270 different hooks in this box, meticulously labeled and organized in their own slot. So a true tackle organizer OCD person's dream. Every hook, every size you need, in order, labeled and stored correctly in its own contained box. And then when you want to get a hook out, you just remove the entire little mini box that has those hooks in it. You open it up, you take one out, you close it back up, and then you slide it right back in its labeled slot. Again, it's just a genius system that just makes you happy when you're looking at it, that everything is right there, it's organized, and it just puts your heart at ease. You're like, all my hooks right here are in a row, they're labeled, everything is right in the world. And even more clever, the hooks themselves are being sold in the boxes that automatically fit into this OCD storage box. So straight from the store to the box. Again, a very smart, simple, slick design. I really liked it. Now, the whole system they're selling is $299, but remember, it comes with 270 hooks. All the compartments, all the boxes itself, everything that comes with this is like a $360 value for $299. And then you're set on hooks for a long, long time for any situation. A very cool idea and product from BKK Hooks, who are becoming a big up-and-coming hook brand here in the United States after being popular internationally for years. So the first time I ever heard of BKK Hooks was from Derek Carr over at Beast Coast, because he uses BKKs in a lot of his jigs, and I've been a fan of them ever since. So a really cool product. The BKK Hooks OCD storage system wins best tackle management product. Okay, next here we have the category for custom tackle and component, aka making your own gear. And we happen to get this one right too. Out of all of the options, we chose the Do It Mold hover jig mold, and that actually ended up being your winner this year. So pretty standard here. Do It Molds comes out with a do-it-yourself mold for one of the hottest techniques out there right now, saving people a ton of money by making these themselves versus paying for a name brand, especially with something like a hover rig where you don't need to paint it. All all of the lead that you're molding around the hook is actually buried inside the soft plastic anyway, just based on the way that you rig this. So it doesn't have to be pretty. It's not fancy. It's very utilitarian, and there's no reason why, if you fish hover rigs a lot, you shouldn't be making them yourselves on the hook you want, in the sizes you want, in the quantities you want, while saving a boatload of money. So the Do It hover rig mold, I think, is your worthy winner of custom tackle and component this year. All right, now the next to last category that I voted for here was the motorized boating accessory, and it was in this category. It's actually a kayak piece, but it's in the motorized boating accessory category because it's a kayak motor. So it kind of sucks for them, right? They should probably be in the non-motorized boating accessory category because it's for kayaks, but because, it is a motor, it has to go into the motorized boating category. So your winner actually for the motorized boating accessory this year was the Power Pole dual blades powered by One Pump. And if you're a big boat guy, if you have power poles, the dual blades powered by the One Pump does look cool. Basically, it looks like it's now a package where you can simultaneously deploy your power poles in a smoother, quieter fashion, and it takes up less space inside your boat because you're now using the One Pump for both blades. So smoother, quieter, takes up less space, and a solid upgrade. It looks like on paper anyway, if you're running power poles. But my pick, the one that I alluded to, was the Newport NK180 Pro, which is the upgraded version of the kayak motor that I currently use right now. And at the first look, I looked at the NK180 Pro, and it just looks like it got cosmetic upgrades and a few tiny fixes for some cost-saving measures, stuff like that. And some of that may be true, but I made a point to go over and talk to Newport at this show, and even got the chance to sit down and chat with their president for a long time about the differences in the new NK180 Pro, and I got the lowdown in a very honest, candid conversation. So, like I said, I have the old NK180, the old model. That's what I actually have on my kayak that I use as a motor, and I like it in terms of what it allows me to do, which is obviously motorize my kayak. It gives me enough customization where I can add and engineer my own foot steering, and the setup that I have now I actually really like. And unlike a Torqeedo, which is who this motor was obviously modeled after, you can use your own battery. So I can use my 24-volt, 60-amp-hour Dakota Lithium and go for days, and I don't have to rely on a Torqeedo battery that I have to use theirs, and I can't use my own, and then there's a lack of customization options to fit my needs. So that's why I bought the NK180 from Newport originally, and I paid full price for it. I'm not one of the 10,000 people that are now on their ever-expanding pro staff trying to shove these things down your throat. I'm a customer that bought this product because I had a need and it seemed to be the best fit for it. So then a year later, they come out with the NK180 Pro. And even though on the surface, it just looks like kind of a silver throttled version of what I already have, it's actually got some worthy upgrades, and they address some of the pain points that I currently have with their old model. So my biggest gripe with the NK180 is getting it in the bracket when I'm ready to get in the water. It has this really stupid, quick release latch on it, and then it has this free floating metal tube that runs alongside the axle that you have to line up absolutely perfectly to get it to sit in the mount. But the problem is, once you line that tube up, now your outer portions of that axle are unaligned. So then you try and scoot those over, and when you scoot that over, it moves that tube out of the perfect spot that it needed to be. It is beyond frustrating. I don't know how to explain it, but anybody that's ever owned an NK180 knows exactly what I'm talking about, and it's like the most annoying thing in the world. So now they fixed that, and the new axle and connection system just goes through an eyelet and then screws on one side versus the quick latch that actually sits down in the mount. So that's a good upgrade. The next thing is that they say they've addressed the throttle issue, where the amount that you push the throttle isn't always proportional to how much speed you're gaining or reducing. So for instance, on my NK180, if you're at 80% throttle or 100% throttle, it doesn't matter. You're getting the same speed and the same rotation out of that prop. There's no difference. You can feel it. It's just an empty movement going from 80 to 100. There's no difference in RPM, nothing. That is just kind of a dead 20% range. And there are little pockets like that all throughout the throttle profile. So they supposedly have fixed that to give you a more consistent throttle up and down. So some worthy improvements to the NK180 Pro, along with some internal engineering that I'll be honest, I don't really understand because a lot of that goes over my head, but it got my vote. For kayak folks that want to dip their toes into motorized kayaks, it's a cost-effective, efficient, customizable way to do that, the NK180 is tough to beat for the price. They're like $1,000. Again, that's coming from me, a paying customer, not some online advertiser or something. But then we get to the final category here, a snub that I'm still very salty about, but that's okay. The category is electronics. And your winner for the 2024 electronic category at ICAST is a freaking drone. A fishing drone. I'm not making this up. It's called the X-Piece 1 fishing drone. And it is, quote, a waterproof fishing drone that can fly in the air, float on water, and see underwater while navigating on the surface. Its HD camera sends live video to a waterproof remote control so you can drop 8 pounds of bait up to a mile out. The X-Piece 1 is the first drone ever equipped with bite sense, which allows you to troll a bait and automatically release it when a fish bites. This drone retails at $2,300. So, a saltwater drone that can carry bait and floats. Why? I don't know. Maybe you hardcore salt guys can educate me, but I think this has absolutely zero effect on us freshwater bass anglers. We're not going to go out and chum the water from our dock an hour before takeoff with our $2,300 drone. So my vote actually went to the Lowrance Fish Eagle Pack. We talked about it earlier, $1,000 for full plug-and-play forward-facing sonar, not some gimmicky $2,300 saltwater drone or whatever that is. So that left like 35 different categories that I just didn't vote for because the majority of those categories were saltwater or fly fishing or apparel or something, or some really odd, silly categories with no clear winner in them. And then we get to the final big vote, which is where all of the best of category winners get put in a line and we get to vote for best in show for the top new product of the year. So there were 44 options to choose from, a lot of saltwater, a lot of fly fishing things that I'm not going to take the time to go over because they don't matter to us. But our important winners from the bass fishing side were the Ugly Stick GX2 for freshwater rod, the St. Croix GXR Bass Systems Combo for rod and reel combo, the Vanford FA for freshwater reel, the Shadtron from Z-Man for the best freshwater soft lure, Berkeley Kredge for the best freshwater hard lure, Suffolk's Revolve for the best fishing line, VMC Redline Series Tungsten Swimbait Jigs for the best terminal tackle, BKK's OCD Tackle Storage System for tackle management, the Hover Jig Mold from Do It Molds for custom tackle and components, the Wilderness Systems Tactical Pro 128 for boats and watercraft, and the Connect Ease Power Pack Pro for non-motorized boating accessory. And of all of those, my vote actually went to the BKK Hooks OCD Tackle Storage System. I just thought it was the coolest, most unique, practical thing there that affected someone like me, middle to, maybe slightly higher end of the road bass angler. But instead, the winner at ICAST 2024 for Best in Show was some crazy saltwater Terminator looking reel, the Penn Fathom Electric, which is one of those giant power-assisted saltwater reels that I know absolutely nothing about, but looks like it's going to take over the world with AI. So that is your recap for the award winners that I think actually matter to us, and then a transparent look at who I actually voted for. Okay, folks, and finally here, if you stuck with us this long, thank you so much. I know this is an insanely long episode, but there's just so much to cover, and we've made it to our grand finale here, which is going to be Tackle Talk's top 5 best in show from 2024 and our top 3 worst in show from ICAST this year. So let's start with the fun one. Let's go worst in show. So coming in at number 3, third place for Tackle Talk's 2024 worst in show voting is purely because of their name, which they probably should have thought to check through in the English translation before setting up a table at ICAST, was a fishing line company called Suckwang. Yes, Sukwang. Suckwang. You cannot make that up. A giant sign on top of their booth. This was not a joke, booth or some gimmick. This was like a, Chinese or Japanese line company that was there, talking to people. Suckwang. So the almighty Suckwang fishing line is going to win our third place in worst in show voting. Okay, now on a little bit more serious note, our second place finisher for Tackle Talk's Worst in Show at ICAST 2024 goes to Natural Selection Lures and their brand new, innovative, dare I say, game-changing lure, Alex the Propelligator. So in your mind, I want you to close your eyes, hopefully you're not driving, and picture the Savage Gear 3D Suicide Duck, which was a duck-shaped topwater lure with 2 feet that rotated like a prop bait. Alex the Propelligator is an alligator version of that, except even dumber, with a collapsible frog-like body and traditional frog hooks, and then one single stinger hook sticking out the back a little bit past the prop legs. So it is a topwater prop frog bait, mixture that's shaped like an alligator with bad hook placement. This right here is what people think of when they make fun of ICAST. Weird shock value lures that nobody is actually going to use, and these companies are just trying to be quirky and off the wall for attention. So Natural Selection Lures and their Alex the Propelligator are a perfect example of that, coming in at number 2 in Tackle Talk's Worst in Show voting. And finally, we have arrived to our least coveted honor of the evening as we reveal the 2024 ICAST Worst in Show as decided on by the Tackle Talk podcast. And this award is going to go to Handing Fishing Tackle. And Handing Fishing Tackle gets this honor not just for one product, but their whole line of products, as they were showing off their new M1 plopper lure, their new metal jointed swim bait, their new metal jointed swim bait with tongue, which is a poor English translation of crankbait, and lipless crankbait. And the reason they're going to win Worst in Show this year is because in true shock value lure form, every one of their lures is in the shape of one fish or predator eating another right on the lure. So for example, the double blade plopper is in the design of this like dinosaur alligator crocodile mixture eating a bait fish, giant teeth and all, eyes, everything, the whole 9 yards. It's sort of graphic. It almost looks like it's supposed to be spooky or scary, but it's clearly made for more of a shock value and an attention thing than actually fish catching ability. So just a very corny, gimmicky company and a gimmicky bait line where the heavy majority of people are just going to look at this and laugh out loud and not spend their hard-earned money to buy. So congratulations to the worst thing we saw all week at ICAST, the Handing Fishing Tackle line of hard baits. Okay, so that brings us to our final piece of business here at ICAST 2024, which is Tackle Talk's personal top 5 best in show products. So without further ado, let's get to number 5. Our 5th place finisher for Best in Show at ICAST 2024 is going to be the St. Croix Black Bass Series. And these were one of the best surprises that I had at the whole show that I wasn't expecting. An insanely large, comprehensive line of rods that didn't look or feel like anything that St. Croix has been putting out lately. And I think they're very reasonably priced rods for what you're getting. So kudos to St. Croix, our number 5 pick for Best in Show. Now for our number 4 pick here, our 4th place finisher is going to be the Shimano Vanford. Just a clean but still needed redesign of one of the best spinning reels on the planet, implementing features that before this week were only found in reels that were 3 times the price. So a welcome refresh for an already great reel gives us our 4th place for Best in Show. Now, 3rd place here is going to be a rod that as soon as I picked up, I thought was one of the coolest rods that I've seen in a long time, especially at a sub $200 price point, and it is, of course, the Daiwa Kage Premium Bass rods. They're a clean, lightweight, stylish rod that has a great mixture of looks and functionality at a price that most serious bass anglers can still swallow at $200. And not to mention that custom deep red Daiwa air sensor reel seat is just the icing on the cake for this rod. And that brings us to our 2nd place finish for Best in Show here at ICAST 2024. And I've got a dark horse here for you that we haven't even mentioned once in this episode until now. And it's going to be, of all things, braided line. So your second place for Tackle Talk's Best in Show goes to a company called X-Braid, and specifically their X-Braid X8 Finesse braided line. So this brings up a bigger point, which is that there was a secondary trend at ICAST this year, and it was finesse braid. Very small diameter, thin braids, which of course obviously help you on forward-facing sonar and that whole craze, but almost everybody was coming out with finesse braid. You had Suffix, you had Berkeley, you had Seagar, a ton of people with their new finesse braids this year. But my overwhelming favorite by a long shot was this company I've never even heard of before, but I was extremely impressed with their finesse braid, and it's called X-Braid. So the X-Braid X8 finesse braid has some sort of smooth surface treatment that they do to the outside of this line that makes this line, especially in the standard like 8, 10, 15 pound sizes, have little to no texture when you run your hands down the side of it, and it's noticeably smoother than almost every other braid that I've ever felt on the market, even some of the comparable braids that came out this year in the Finesse series from, Berkeley. So they had Berkeley Forward, Seagar had, I think it was called like PEX8, that was their version. It was smoother than both of those. It was smoother than the Suffix Revolve, which actually won for best line this year. This X-Braid felt better than all of them. So when I asked about this line to the lady running the X-Braid booth, there was a little bit of a language barrier, obviously, but she told me that Daiwa is actually going to be handling almost all of the X-Braid lines and the distribution moving forward. So then I walked right across the hall. I went to talk to Daiwa, and they confirmed that. So it sounds like X-Braid will be some sort of Daiwa brand or affiliation moving forward. But when I tell you that this line is impressive, I mean it. The 6 pound, the 8 pound, the 10 pound were crazy light, crazy thin, enough to where I think I would probably just bump up to like 15 pound, give myself the extra strength and call it a day, especially as smooth and as thin as this line was. Because right now I'm running like Sunline SX1, which I think is 0.007 inches in diameter, and then this X-Braid at the same pound test, 10 pound test, was 0.006 inches, which that might seem like a small difference, but that's like 14% thinner, and it's noticeably smoother and thinner when you run your hand down that braid. So second place for our personal best in show here at ICAST 2024 goes to a dark horse, X-Braid, and their X8 finesse braided line. All right, everybody, and that brings us to our actual most prestigious honor of the episode, our personal pick for Best in Show. And for us this year, I think the most influential and important product for regular Joes in the bass fishing world was the Lowrance Eagle Eye package, for the simple reason that this is the first time ever that a company has lowered the barrier of entry for forward-facing sonar to the level of regular, serious bass anglers. At $999, you get a plug-and-play forward-facing sonar transducer and screen bundle that has the ability to put the most influential and beneficial technology of our lifetime in the hands of millions of anglers that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it. Now, however you feel about forward-facing sonar, I really don't want to get into that because that horse has been beat and beat and beat into oblivion. I don't want to go down that road. But however you feel about it, I think we can all agree this is the most impactful product. Whether you like it or not, it's impactful for people like me, for people like us that listen to this podcast, because this is targeted at us and it puts this technology in our hands a lot of times for the first time. And then the ripples of this are going to be felt for years to come because Lowrance just busted the dam wide open. Before this week, if you wanted forward-facing sonar and that type of setup, you were looking at $2,500 to $3,000 minimum. And that's if you wanted a small 9-inch screen and a basic setup. Well, now Lowrance has started a war that will likely force the two bigger companies, Humminbird and Garmin, to compete at that price point or risk losing a huge portion of entry to mid-level anglers that can't afford a $5,000 electronic setup. This right here is how prices start to come down. It takes one company to break that sort of oligopoly that they all have and then force the others to compete. So congratulations to Lowrance, who takes home the Tackle Talk Podcast Best in Show honors at ICAST 2024. All right, everybody, that is our episode today as we recap ICAST 2024 and all of the products that caught our eye for good or not so good reasons this year. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this episode. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us through this whole episode. I know it's a long one, but it's just not in my DNA to do an episode like this without trying to provide you with as much information as I was able to soak up and report that back to you guys, the listeners, even if it takes a couple hours to do it. So I greatly appreciate you all tuning in. I hope it was an enjoyable, informative episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed a look at the full ICAST show from a truly unbiased perspective that I really think you're not going to get anywhere else on the internet. So as always, thank you all for listening. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. It's just Tackle Talk Bass Fishing Podcast, because we're going to be releasing videos of our interviews from ICAST with visuals, and 3 or 4 of them are already up on the channel, so you can get a better idea of the products that we were describing. So other than that, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at Tackle Talk Podcast. Find us on the website, tackletalkpodcast.com, and we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.